I'd like to call to order this special meeting of District 116 for Wednesday, January 23rd, 2019. Roll call, please.
Member Carter.
Here.
Member Hall.
Here.
Member Pulaski.
Here.
Member Fisher is here. Vice President Rollins Gay. President Demmett.
There are no additions, corrections, or modifications to this evening's agenda. We have no citizens present, so there'll be no citizen statements. There's no call for an executive session after tonight's meeting. Motion to approve this single item agenda tonight, which is interviews.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion is carried. And so we begin with our first interview this evening, which is with School Exec Connect. For purposes of go ahead and take your place. For purposes of those that are watching on television, the purpose of this meeting tonight is to interview potential company, to not potential companies, real companies. Got that taken care of? To interview companies for possibly assisting us with our superintendent and assistant superintendent searches. So with that, our first interview tonight is with School Exec Connect. First presentation / interview. So I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you all for having us. We're going to do some self-introductions here and go through some key features of the proposal that you have in front of you, and we're looking forward to working with this great school board and this great community. My name is Kevin O'Mara. I am a retired public school superintendent, retired now for a year and a half, yay. I am now a full-time associate professor in the Department of Leadership at Concordia University up in the Chicago area. I work with people who want to be superintendents, believe it or not, and it's a great way for me to give back to the community and give back to the school system. We'd like to be part of your process moving forward, and I'm married to Sharon for over 30 years now, 3 wonderful children, and I'm the luckiest guy on the face of the earth, and we're happy to be here. Diane?
I'm Diane Robertson. I'm a partner with the firm School Exec Connect. I've been a partner for a couple of years now. I've been with the firm for about 10, 12 years. I don't know. I lose track of time. What I do know for sure is that I retired as a school superintendent after 22 years, just about 6 years ago. I have that date in my mind. I do superintendent searches with the firm, enjoy doing that. I also am working with IASA as a mentor for new superintendents around the state. So I'm on the road a lot, helping superintendents be successful as they start out their careers. I am also the mother of 7 and the grandmother of 18. So I also have some busyness at home.
Yes, she does.
And got to get out and do something else once in a while. So we're very honored to be here, and I look forward to having a discussion with you.
Good evening. I'm Tim Shimp. I'm not retired. I'm currently the superintendent in Yorkville School District, western suburb of Chicago. We're a district of about 6,300 students, K-12. I'm new to the firm as an associate, so I'm looking forward to being part of this search. Personally, I have 4 students, 4 kids of my own. 2 are at Iowa, University of Iowa, and then I have 2 at the high school level still in Yorkville. So thanks for having us.
Okay, so what we would like to do is get to the meat of our proposal, considering that we have an hour to spend with you, and we want to make sure that we get through our entire process and then leave plenty of time at the end for question and answer. If you do have questions while we're presenting, feel free to jump in. Sometimes you lose a question and you forget to come back to it, so feel free to interrupt us if you want to. We're going to start on page 9 of the proposal that we have, which is really the proposed search plan. I'm assuming that you have all read the introduction about who we are as a firm. I do want to say that even though our official address is in Minnesota, we are not really per se a Minnesota firm. We were born out of Highland Park, Illinois, and a couple of years ago, I think about 5 years ago, the president switched. And so the president, who is currently the president now, Mr. Ken Dragseth, happens to live in Minnesota, and that's why the firm's address is Minnesota. But we were born in Illinois, and we still do a lot of Illinois searches, and the 3 of us live in Illinois. So before we go through the components of our search plan, I want you to know that what we have proposed to you is our typical protocol for our search. but I want you to understand that it can be customizable to what your specific needs are. So don't think that you're stuck with what we've proposed if there's something that might work a little bit better for you. We are very flexible, and we're willing to work with boards to do that.
Absolutely.
One thing that our firm prides itself on is our level of success. We've done over 360 superintendent searches, and we have a 96% success rate, and we define that by the number of superintendents who are offered successive contracts after their first one. Okay? So how do we get such good rate of success? We are very, very adamant that we look for the right fit for you. We are all superintendents, or have been. We understand that if you don't have the right fit at the top, nothing's going to work down below. And if you don't have the right fit at the top, you are continually turning over leadership. And when you turn over leadership at the top, like a revolving door, nothing can happen to move education forward for the kids. So we're very passionate about finding the right person for you. We don't have a slate of candidates that we tout around from, search to search. You will find in our process that we will actually come in, we'll dig around, we'll figure out who it is that you're looking for, and then something we pride ourselves on is that we go out and actively recruit the candidates that would be a good match for you. So that's basically why we've been very successful. Okay, so we will follow that through our entire process, that part. So we've got a couple of phases that our search would take, and the very first one is phase A on page 9, and that is the opening of the search. We've got some suggested timelines on here. Again, those can be adjusted. The search can be tightened up, or it could be stretched out based on your desires. So if you were to select us as your firm to work with you, the process would begin with signing a letter of agreement so that we have an official contract and everybody understands the terms of that contract for you guys and for us as a search firm. And then we would schedule with you an initial planning meeting. We would suggest, we're kind of at the end of January now, so that would have to be pushed into February. But we would actually come and sit down with you. We would ask you to bring your calendars. We'll bring our calendars, and we'll sketch out the entire search from beginning to end. We'll select what dates we're going to meet with you, what dates we're going to do all of our processes, what time frame we're planning on making an announcement for your superintendent. By the way, I'm saying superintendent, but I understand there's 3 positions that we're talking about here. And we would just line the whole thing out. Everything that we decide as far as how the search works and all the timeline and processes, we would recommend that you put everything on your website so that your constituents and your community can keep track of where we're at in the process, what's going on. Okay? Any questions about the opening? Okay. The second part would be creating the profile. Like I said before, we're looking for somebody who would be a good fit for what it is that you're looking for. So there's a couple different things that we would do there. We're recommending in January, February. Again, we'd probably push that back into maybe early March. We would come and we would have a closed session with the board, and we would interview you for specific things that you're looking for in your new superintendent. The reason we would do that in closed session is there might be some things that you would need to share with us that you could not share in session that would let us know what type of person would and would not fit your current situations, okay? So we're going to just be asking you a couple of questions on, what's good about your district, why would somebody want to be here, what are the issues in your district? Everybody has issues. We're just going to lay them all out so that we don't bring you somebody who's not prepared or ready or doesn't have the experiences that you need to be successful here in Urbana. We would also want to have stakeholder involvement. Our community involvement is a key part of our search process. So we would ask to hold focus groups with various constituents in the district. We would like to talk to parents. We would like to talk to community members. We would like to talk to staff, teachers, administrators, students, booster groups, civic organization leaders,
Local
city leaders.
local elected officials,
Just
perhaps?
good cross-section of who you serve. We want to hear the same things from them. We want to know what's good about your district, we want to know what the issues are, what kinds of skills and characteristics and traits it would take for, to get you the best candidate. Another thing that we would do is have a couple of open forums for people who weren't designated to come to the focus groups. Focus groups would be probably like 10 to 15 people, and they would be picked. We would guide you through the process of how to pick them, but then we would also have a couple of open forums for just anybody that would want to come and voice their opinion on what skills and characteristics and traits that they would want. We would have an open forum for community members. We would also have an open forum for staff members. A fourth thing that we would do is we would also develop an online survey that we would put out to reach the final band of your community and your stakeholders, basically asking the same types of questions but in a little bit different format. And we would have that link up for probably about 10 days or so. Ask your residents to take that survey and submit it to us. We would collect all the data, and then we would take all those different components, talking to the board, the intense focus groups, the open forums, and then the district-wide survey, take all of that data, find out what keeps getting said over and over and over again. If people are saying we want somebody who wears green jeans, eats pizza, has a cat, that's who we're looking for. Okay? We're looking for the themes, the common themes. Because if we can find those common themes, then we probably are going to find the right person that will be good for the entire community. One thing to keep in mind also is that we're not searching for a superintendent for these 7 board members. Boards change, okay? And so we're looking for the right person for this community and this school district. Also have to get along with the board. We understand that too. That's a part of it. Okay? We would develop the profile, put it in writing. We would come back and share it with you, ask you to share that out with your community so that everybody knows who it is we're looking for. This is the person that we're looking for. We would have you.
I want to build on that last comment you made, because in particular, there's an election this April, and we know we'll have at least one new member of the board, and then we have 2 other contested positions. So I appreciate your comment about searching for a superintendent for the community,
Right.
as opposed to the 7 of us.
Right. So you bring up a good point, and I'm glad that you brought that up because I may have forgotten to mention that, but when we do a search that overlaps a board election, which this will do, we will invite and ask you to consider inviting any candidate who's running to be involved in the process, because it will be a different board who will probably actually name the superintendent. So we would like everyone to be involved up to the point that you have the election, and then just continue forward with those who are successful, because they will ultimately be responsible for that decision and for
With the exception
working.
of the closed session with the 7 of us.
Exactly.
Exactly right.
Exactly.
All right.
Mhm.
Exactly right.
Okay, any questions about Phase B, that developing the profile? Okay. So we got the profile developed. While we are doing all that work, we will have already on the back end, moving into Phase C now, we will have posted your search on our website. We will do an advertising campaign that we would talk to you about and decide how you want to advertise. We'll go over that in a little bit. We will be using our network to actively recruit as we start talking to you, even before we get that whole profile put together. We're going to start getting an idea, who we're looking for. So we're going to be out talking, we're going to be making phone calls. We have a wide network.
We have over 60 people involved with our firm all across the country that help us find the right fit for your district.
These are the 3 faces you'll get tired of looking at after a while.
Absolutely.
We will be the ones that will be here and be working with you, but we've got other people that are also going to be helping us. Our other constituents will also help us. So it's a wide-reaching network that we'll use, okay? So we will take care of all of the accepting of the applications, the screening of the applications. You won't have to get involved in that because you've got other business to work on. We're going to use that profile to recruit and to match, the candidate pool. Once we have the application deadline close, We will go through the entire pool of candidates that have applied, whether they were recruited or they just applied on their own. And we will look and see who on paper matches your profile the closest. Then we actually sit face-to-face with each of those candidates that's a promising candidate. We won't do a phone interview, we won't do just a paper interview, we will meet face-to-face. We will already know what some of the key issues are by then. We're gonna put them through an interview and see how they answer some of the things that we know are issues here, or some of the qualities that you're looking for, to see if they actually have those. We will, after those face-to-face interviews, we will narrow down the slate of candidates that we would present to you, about 5 to 7. 6 is kind of the number we like to land on, but if we don't have 6 quality candidates, we're not gonna bring you some fluff, okay? If we have 7 quality candidates, we're gonna let you see 7 quality candidates. We don't wanna leave somebody out, all right? If you would happen to have any internal candidates, we would recommend that they follow the exact same process. They either make it or they don't, based on their ability to make it through our screening process.
We bring forward the people that we think are the best fit for your profile based on conversations with the board, the focus groups, the survey, the open forums, irregardless of anything else that's out there as far as background or other things. We want perfect matches for this position based on the profile that we've developed.
Now, what we probably won't bring you are 5 to 7 cookie cutter superintendents, okay? They're gonna be different personalities that will come, different strengths.
Different backgrounds.
And different backgrounds, but any of the people that we would bring to you, we would feel confident could do the job. It would be up to you then to decide who you want to get married to. Okay, who do you want to give the engagement ring to?
That's good,
Okay?
a good description, yeah.
Okay. We pride ourselves on vetting. We do a thorough vetting process. We know a lot of people. One thing that we do try to do is protect the confidentiality of the people who are applying. But at the same time, we know who we can talk to that won't give up that, that confidentiality, so we can really vet these people, these candidates, so we can know what's really going on in their history. Are they trying to pull the wool over us? That kind of thing. We've got ways to figure that out.
And just to the point of confidentiality, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Okay.
We like to propose a confidential search to the extent that we're able to do so. It expands your pool greatly. If superintendents or people in central office positions know their name won't be disclosed in the press until the end of the process has happened. So that's what we mean by as far as a confidential versus a non-confidential
Right.
search.
You'll get a much wider pool of fish when you cast your net.
We'll get there. I just want to make sure that we
I think the
understand.
reading was that at the point where we narrow it down to 1 or 2 or 3 finalists.
Exactly right.
Yes.
That's the point.
And then even at that point, we can decide how you want to approach it.
And different boards take different tacks along those lines, so we can talk about that when the
Right.
time is appropriate.
Urbana will probably
Want to announce.
prefer the open.
Yeah.
We get that.
Okay.
We get that.
So we will do our due diligence on reference checking. If there is anything at all questionable about any of the candidates that we might bring to you, we would let you know what that is, and then you decide whether or not it's something that you think that you could go forward with, or just stop right there, it's not gonna work here, okay? We typically don't have that, but if we did have that, sometimes people get hired and fired for the right and wrong reasons. It's just a fact of life.
Boards turn over or whatever, and people
There's
lose
just all
jobs.
kinds of things out there. We will try best to bring you people who don't have issues in their background, but if we think there's a good quality candidate that might have something, we will let you make that decision as to whether or not you want to even interview that person, okay?
I just had a quick question
Yes.
for you. So do you have any certain order, since you're looking for a super and assistant,
Yes.
what is that? Do you try to line up the super first, or
Yes.
does it all just come out in one?
We're gonna take this in stages, and we're gonna cover that.
Okay,
But
sorry.
we're-
I didn't
No,
mean to
that-
be.
Yeah,
that- good
that's
question.
a good question. That's a good question.
I'll go over
We-
the second half of the presentation in just a
Okay.
moment.
Yeah, we're gonna start with the superintendent's position, because that's the most vital and most important for you.
And the
We're gonna
lengthier
weave
because-
in those other two too. Okay, so I'm talking about just the superintendent position right now, and Kevin's gonna show how those assistant
It
positions
kind of
will
folds in
work
after that.
Okay? All right. I talked about vetting. We will do a vetting process. We will recommend that at the end, before you sign a contract with anybody, that you guys also do your own vetting. We've got some suggestions on how you do that. You can do site visits. We can do reference calls. We ask the candidates to give us a whole list of people that you can call. We also recommend that you hire a professional background search company to do a thorough vetting process.
That we would arrange, it would be an additional expense for the
We would
district.
arrange for that, but, there are certain records and court records and things that we can't get into, but that they could. So we're gonna do our best to get the first round of vetting going, but we want you to also have some ownership in that. We pride ourselves that we have never had one of those foul-smelling searches, I guess, for lack of a better term, where, something came out after the fact. We don't want that. We like our reputation. We want to keep our reputation stellar. We don't want you to have to go through that. So we're not going to go there. We're not going to let that happen.
Our success rate is at 96%, and we've never had payment withheld by a board, had a search go south, had anything like that happen. We like Diane says, our reputation for us is everything.
Right. Okay, so that's part C. That's developing that candidate pool. Any questions about the development there? Okay, let's finish up this search. So when we get to the actual selecting of the candidates, we will come in and conduct an interviewing workshop with the board. We'll teach you how to interview. We're gonna let you know what you can and can't ask, so you don't get yourself into trouble. We're gonna give you some sample questions that could start your brain thinking about what types of things would we really want to know when we get these people in front of us. Any kind of questions that we could answer as far as, protocol for interviewing goes. We'll guide you through that. We will also do a compensation study for you of what, whoever you want us to compare you to. Could be your conference schools, it could be area schools, it could be like-sized schools.
We can do a
any-
LUDA comparison, for
Any
example,
way
something like that.
that you want us to compare you. And we will do a salary and benefits comparison so that you can see what other people are paying.
Downstate Luda, we have board members, when I've been involved in this before. We have comparative school districts that we use, which are
Right.
south of 80, north of 70 Luda schools.
Right in the center of Illinois, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So we do that so that you have an idea what the going rate is. We give experience, how long those superintendents been there, all that kind of stuff, so that you're not unnecessarily paying too high for your person to come in, and you're not trying to lowball somebody that's coming in, so that you give a fair range.
And the compensation report is more than just salary, it's vacation days, it's personal days, it's
Yeah.
stipends and things like that that might be associated with the position. So we'll give you a very complete and detailed picture to use as you will.
Okay. So the first interview would happen. We will take care of scheduling all the interviews. We would have to set some times aside for you guys to commit to. But we would have you run through an interview let's say we have 6 candidates. We'd run through all 6 candidates with a first round interview. And then we would guide you through the process of being able to narrow down to 3. We suggest that you narrow down to 3 that you would like to have a second look at, okay? So then we would have you come back and interview those 3 a second time to try to narrow down to your 1, all right? At the point where you have named 3 finalists, then you can decide, do we want to make those finalists, public? Do we want to keep that still confidential? You can do either one. We'll just tell you that if you keep it confidential up to that point, you'll have a little bit bigger pool. If you keep it confidential till you get to the final 1, you'll have your biggest pool. But again, that's up to you guys on how you want to handle that. And that's not something that has to be decided right off the bat. You can do some discussion about that. Our process that we recommend also has community and staff engagement in the interview process. So once you narrow down to your top 3, we would recommend some committees of staff, faculty, administration, definitely administration, this is who they're going to be working with, parents, community groups, high school students. Your high school students are interested in who your superintendent is. Don't think that they're not. And they have some pretty darn good ideas about who
They
they
really
want
do-
here.
they really
They're
do.
good. The purpose of those interviews is not to pick the new superintendent for the board, but to give you some feedback.
And that's all
In
it
the
is. They
form
don't-
of strengths and weaknesses
They
on
don't
each of
rank
the
them or anything like
candidates.
that. We ask them not to do that. They just give feedback to the board. It's your decision, but it's really good feedback typically.
After the second round interviews and the committee interviews, and you get that feedback, then the board narrows down and makes a choice on who they want to court for the signing of a contract. It's at that point, then we ask you to investigate your final candidate. There's no sense in going into a community and disrupting if you're not, wanting to entertain that final candidate. Okay, so are there any questions about the interviewing process? Okay. Let's wrap in then the assistant superintendent
Sure.
process.
So we'll touch on page 14, which kind of talks about the second part of the search, which is the assistant superintendent positions. And I'll wait for you to get there. It says part 2, mine's in color. I don't know if yours is in color or not. Very nice.
Yeah, page 14.
So we have 2 additional positions to fill for the district as well, and it's a package deal. We'll do all the work behind the scenes as part of our fee. And there, again, as Diane has mentioned, these timelines are associated with the timeline that's sketched out for the superintendent search. These decisions we'll talk about during the planning meeting when we first sit down, if we are engaged to be your firm. This is a sketch. These are things written in pencil, not in pen at this point. So I'd like to kind of walk through the steps associated with these 2 positions. Again, step 1 would be that we would start the letter of agreement, the same letter of agreement that we talked about in the earlier conversation. The planning meetings we would do probably simultaneously as the planning meeting for the superintendent search. We'd kind of wrap this up into one effort with the Board of Education, so we don't have you back here 5 nights a week. So we'll confer with the interim superintendent to determine the schedule, whatever advertising the board and he want to do in the selection process for the search. Typically, we have this on our own website. We have the job link to that website posted on your own website. We have it at the IASA Job Bank. All these things are free, and that typically is sufficient for these kinds of positions. If the board or the interim superintendent jointly want to do something different, we're open to those suggestions, and we have some here as part of the proposal. We don't recommend that. It's just a waste of money in our opinion. We would develop the candidate pool in February and April. We would recruit candidates who are excellent matches for the position based on your job descriptions. We would, again, talk about advertising. We'll talk about what venues and methodologies to talk about at our planning meeting. We will accept applications for position on our own website. Again, if they start to go into the district, then they're FOIAble, and we don't want that to take place. We'll do all the heavy lifting as far as that's concerned. We'll use your existing or modified job description that you will provide to us. We'll interview selected candidates that we feel are a good match face-to-face. Again, we don't do the video conferencing. We don't do the telephone interviews like other firms do. We come down here, we interview these candidates. We think that's extremely important, and we're committed to that process. Again, that's part of our fee. We will conduct reference checks on the slate of candidates that we are bringing forward to the district for the district to interview. And the district will review the the consultants will review the final slate of candidates with your interim superintendent and anyone else we are requested to meet on the candidate pool. So names, or the interim superintendent has names that you want us to interview, we're happy to do that as well. Late April. This is the point where your new superintendent may have been chosen and hired by the board. That's when he or she gets involved in this process. These people work directly under the superintendent, the new superintendent. We think that's an important consideration to take into the process. The new superintendent and the interim and others they choose to involve, maybe parts of the administrative team or so forth, would interview the candidate pool and narrow their choice to the finalists that they would recommend to the Board of Education. If desired, we'll recommend a process to engage stakeholders in the interview process similar to what we've done with the superintendent. Whether you want teachers involved in the interview process, again, not ranking, not selecting, but giving feedback to the new superintendent and the interim superintendent to make their choices a little bit tighter. We would invite that process to take place. We recommend a process, if the board wants us to do background checks, that's an additional fee. That's a criminal background checks for all kinds of criminal and other bankruptcy kinds of records and things like that. Again, we think that's a valuable experience. It's money well spent. You've seen in the paper, superintendents and other people losing their jobs after they've already signed contracts because search firms didn't do their due diligence and recommend it to the Board of Education. We've never been caught up in that, but we've seen it happen in the newspaper. The finalists for the assistant superintendent positions will be recommended to the Board of Education. If the board decides to take those recommendations, the new superintendent would negotiate a final contract. That would probably take us towards May, early June maybe, give us some overlap time to work with the new superintendent to start the position on July 1. That's our target date.
Now, that's our proposal as far as wrapping in the assistant superintendent selection. We're assuming that that interview responsibility and hiring responsibility would lie with the interim and new superintendent. If the board so chose to be involved in the interviewing process, we could also adapt
Adjust that,
that
yep.
and adjust that so that you become involved in that. So we took what a typical scenario would be, and that's to have the superintendent, interim superintendent, actually do those final interviews and the recommendation to the board for hire.
And if you look past the dates there, we have some references on similar searches we've done under similar circumstances, high-profile districts, similar to Urbana, a big school. These are big school districts with high-need kinds of individuals, high-profile positions. We've had good success in using this kind of methodology.
So we actually have two lists of references there, one for superintendent searches and then one for the assistant superintendents, okay? So now if we could go to page 13.
Back it up a little bit.
Yep, we're on the home stretch here. Our consulting fee for the entire process for all three positions would be $28,000. That's inclusive, no hourly fees are charged. If you decide you want to extend the search a little bit or, modify it, that's fine. That's our fee, okay? The expenses, that would be us traveling, us doing some copying, some secretarial work back at the home office. Most of it's going to be travel for us, and it's for all three of us. We would cap that at $5,000. It may not get to $5,000, but that would be capped. We would be coming here to do a planning meeting with you. We would be coming for focus meetings. We would be coming for presenting the new superintendent profile. We would be coming to meet with you to do the interview workshop and provide the slate of candidates. And if desired, we will also come and sit in on your first round interviews, where you're narrowing from 6 to 3. We can just kind of be in the back corner, and if you have questions, about anything, we can do that too. That's all inclusive.
And
that
the open
fee.
forms as well, those two open
Right,
forms
and
that
the
we
open
recommend.
forms.
If the board decides you want to move forward with those. Again,
Mhm.
this is all customizable, but this fee will never be
Now,
exceeded.
if you did want us to do focus groups for some reason for the assistant superintendents, then there would be additional travel cost only, mileage cost only, because we did not build that cost into this, okay? As far as advertising goes, like Kevin mentioned, we have found that you will get national coverage, regional coverage, Midwest coverage at no cost. It happens. News services and wires pick up your search advertisements, and they will just run with it. So why pay for advertising in Education Week when it's going to be out there everywhere on the web? Superintendents nowadays are more, electronically inclined, and they'll be on the web searching for these openings. So we would recommend that you would do advertising on your website. It's going to be advertised on our website. That we would use the IASA, AASA websites because they are at no cost. And we will do some advertising with email blasts out to superintendent networks around the state. You will get coverage. Your advertisement will get out there. One thing that we would want to know from you before we start the advertising campaign is whether or not you want to do a national search or whether you want to keep it more regional. Sometimes boards are interested in people from California, New York, whoever, Sometimes boards aren't. They just want somebody, around the Illinois area. So that's something that we would ask you to guide us in.
I think we're going to be interested in the maximum amount of transparency to the search as possible,
Mhm.
and as wide a network, as wide a net as we
Wide a
can
net?
cast.
Okay, okay,
Because this is the first time this board has been looking for an external candidate
right,
in the last 20 years. And so we need to make good use of our time
exactly,
during that
Understood.
effort.
exactly,
Understood.
exactly. Good. As far as other expense information, we just have in here how the billing would work. We would invoice you 3 times throughout the search. The first one is we would invoice you after the letter of agreement, the signing of the contract to get started. The second would be upon your approval of the new superintendent's contract, and then the final payment would be after the assistant superintendents were hired. So we would invoice you probably in thirds that way. After the candidate pool has been presented to the board, the district incurs the cost of the search. So what we're saying is, once we provide you with a candidate pool, we feel like we've done the search, and you're obligated to pay for the search. Now, we're not finished with it yet, but you have incurred the cost of the search at that point in time. There is a little bit of a statement there about this may include mileage, plane fare, meals. That's in there because some boards, if you're interested in a candidate from Grand Canyon,
Gotta fly 'em in.
you gotta fly them in. And so, if you would have that type of candidate, then that would be an additional cost for the board. So the $28,000 consulting fee, the up to $5,000, that cap for expenses, then if you wanted to pay for an ad, that would be on top of that. We're recommending you don't go there. But if you want to, you can. We can get you those rates if you're interested in that. And we do recommend that you do those deep background searches that are roughly $800.
$850.
$850 for at least the superintendent, and then if you want to do the 2 assistant superintendents too.
You never know what's out there.
We would recommend you do all 3.
How do you feel about the board, Urbana board, or at least representatives of the Urbana board, doing a site visit to the current location?
That's one of the things that we recommend that you do.
Okay.
Mhm. So, site visits, internet checks, deep background check, reference
Calling for
checks.
each member of the board.
We expect all of you to be involved in the vetting process. We're gonna do it first, then we expect you to wrap around behind us and do some more thorough.
And we found that to be an effective methodology.
Our guarantees, we've got a couple of guarantees here. The first one is, if we bring in a slate of candidates and you can't find your superintendent, or you find your superintendent but contract negotiations break down where you just can't come to an agreement or something, we go back out and we get you another candidate pool. And that's at no cost other than actual expenses, mileage. Okay? If we gotta work for you for 3 years, we gotta work for you for 3 years. It's not gonna take us that long, but, we're gonna get you a candidate. And-
Just know that we're committed to making
Right.
sure you get the right leader.
Right, right. So there would be no additional consulting fees if the first round, for some reason, you can't find your person there. We would just keep going. The second one is that if your superintendent or either of the 2 assistant superintendents, for any reason, would resign or be dismissed within the first 2, it says 24 months, it's almost like 2 contracts, okay? We would redo the search for free for you. Okay, again, just the expenses is all we would have. So we're putting our reputation on the line here to get you quality candidates, because we sure don't want to do it again for free, We want these people to have good tenures here in the district. We want them to be a good match for you, so that you can get on the business of looking at the education for your kids. Okay, so I guess that is in a nutshell.
I have a quick question
Yeah.
on that. Have you ever had it happen where a candidate actually declines? And then what happens then? For whatever reason, you get it narrowed down to the final and...
Yes, actually, that did happen to me one time, and that was in Quincy, where I'm from.
That's where I'm from, too.
Are you really?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
We had a slate of candidates that we proposed, and the board went through the first round and went through the second round. narrowed down to their final choice, and they just couldn't get together on the terms of the contract. The salary was a sticking point. They talked and talked and talked. They kept going back to the negotiate, kind of like contract negotiations, you know, you just keep going back, and they just couldn't make it. So we went out and we got them another slate of candidates. Now, when we say we get you another slate of candidates, we don't mean we bring back the number 8, 9, and 10, you know.
We start over.
We start over.
Okay.
We start over. We brought them 4 candidates the next time, and they found their person.
Okay, thank you.
That's never happened to me.
Yeah.
I'm 100% at this point. Other questions from the board?
Yeah, I've worked on something here, to understand your business a little bit. The areas, and since I don't know the terminology,
Okay,
you know,
that's
give me a
fine.
second to get this, you'll understand eventually. Your searches, you deal with nonprofit, non-public, and public school districts,
Yes.
all of that?
Educational institutions, yes.
Okay, just everything,
Uh-huh.
community, consolidated,
Mhm,
you know,
mhm.
school
Absolutely.
district, high school, and so on and so forth.
Mhm.
And have you placed,
I'm sorry?
actually done searches and had a candidate of yours place in all of these types of school districts?
Have we done these types of?
Yes,
Absolutely.
you have, and you've had somebody that you've ended up with
Yes.
somebody that was
Absolutely.
selected,
Yes.
is what,
Absolutely.
where I need to be with that.
Mhm.
What's your average on candidates to come forward, male and female?
You know, I don't think that we can say there's an average.
Okay.
It depends on where the position is in this.
Geographically.
I'm gonna talk about Illinois now because we're in Illinois, okay? Depends on where the position is, you know, how big the position is, what type of position it is, like whether it's a K-12 or whether it's just an elementary. That's gonna dictate kind of what your candidate pool looks like. As far as, I can answer as far as for the searches I've done, what the candidate pool, the successful pool looks like. Of all the searches that I've done, it's been almost 50-50 female-male. And it's been, I want to say, probably 90-10 minority versus Caucasian. Mainly because of the searches that I've done, which have been more downstate. I can tell you that of all the searches that I've done, all but 2 people are still in those positions. And the 2 that aren't in those positions retired. So, I'm sorry, 2 retired, 1 moved to another district after, you know, being renewed. So I like that success rate.
Yeah, to build on what Diane's saying, Diane and I just finished the search for Moline Cove Valley, a big district out in the Quad Cities area.
Yeah.
2 of the 3 finalists were women. And the finalist, the person who was offered the job and signed a contract, and it's public knowledge now, was a woman. Just last year, I did the search for District 205 in Thornton, which is south suburbs of Chicago. Big high school district, about 9,000 students, 3 big high schools. We had 13 people apply, and of the 6 finalists we brought forward, all 6 were African-American candidates. So, to Diane's point, it's really situational. There's no real way to average that out. It kind of depends where you are and what kind of district it is and the geographics behind it.
Okay.
I guess, Bill, another way to look at that is, the associates in your firm, do any of them maintain memberships with, like the Black Education Association, the national, I can't,
Yes.
I'm drawing a blank on the,
Yeah,
on the
one
formal
of our,
name.
the search I did, I'm a senior associate. The associate on the search at 205 was John Sawyer. He is president of the African American Leadership Association.
That's the one I'm looking for. I'm
And
sorry.
coincidentally, his brother used to be mayor of Chicago. I don't know how that's connected or not, but he's been an associate with the firm for a long, long time. He's just an example. We have a wide range of minority candidates. I just finished last year Lansing 158 on the Indiana border, just straight north of here. My associate for that one was David Negron. He's president of the Hispanic Association of Illinois Superintendents right now. So we're well represented as a firm in the minorities pool.
Thank you.
When you, if you were to get the contract and now you're going to search out candidates, what in your history are you seeing the pool come from? And I'm talking about within a 5-mile radius of that district,
Oh,
10
no.
miles,
No.
30, 40, 50, 100,
We
or
would-
even over 200 miles away?
When we,
Oh,
when
sure.
we give you a final report, we will give you all the statistics of the candidate pool, like how many applied, where they come from, what they're, male, female, all that kind of stuff. And you will find candidates apply from other states, even though districts will tell us they really want kind of like an Illinois, search. There will be candidates from New Mexico apply, from Alaska. I mean, because there might be somebody that has a connection with Urbana, Champaign-Urbana area, and they want to come home.
Absolutely.
And as a matter of fact, the person that we just placed at Molinco Valley came from Arizona. She was originally from Iowa, right across the river, but she wanted to come home, and she had Arizona experience, but she also had Iowa experience, and now she's going to have Illinois experience. But she was the best match for them at that point in time. So, no, they'll be from all over.
Just 2 years ago, I
They'll
did
be
a search
from
at
all
Lake
over.
Zurich, a big LUTA district up by the Wisconsin border. I'm sure they're snowed in right now or rained in or something. One of our finalists was living in North Vietnam at the time. He found out about the job. He worked for the American consulate there, I believe, and actually flew in for his finalist job. That was a long flight, I imagine. But to Diane's point, we get people from all over. At the Thornton job I just said, the 205 big high school, one of our finalists was from Colorado. So the name gets out there. We do a good job at making sure that these kinds of things are widely projected out there, and for the educators that want to maybe arrive at Urbana, which is a kind of a destination district in my opinion.
How many people are out there who want to be a superintendent for the very first time? How many do you see when you,
Oh, we
these
see
open
a
up?
good mix of people wanting their first superintendent's job and people who are wanting a change
Yeah,
or
like
a
a
new
second.
challenge. I'd say it's a good, healthy mix. I'd say it's almost half and half.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you?
Yeah. Every time you ask a question, I think of what I've done. Lansing 158, of the 6 finalists, 5 were sitting superintendents, 1 was a principal. The board president yelled at me, said, "He's never been a superintendent. We want somebody experienced." I said, "Just interview him." They picked him. They loved him because he was a good fit. I knew that they would too. I didn't think he would get the job, honestly, because he didn't have that experience, but he got the job. You never know how these things shake out.
What do you think is your average of a candidate who wants to start climbing the ranks? He's been a superintendent in a small district, now he wants to kind of, get the resume looking better or something, over time, wanting to
That's-
advance up. And then also I want to know, what about the ones that want to advance down, get into a smaller district, or they want to hit their place where they want to retire?
I'm going to tell you that with the way the political landscape has been in Illinois over the last probably decade, when a candidate finds a great district, they stay. They're going to stay. They're going to hunker down. They're not going to care about climbing that proverbial ladder up, because there's more intrinsic satisfaction in a place where it's a good fit, than going for the bigger job with maybe bigger headaches and maybe more pay, but your tenure might be short, and you might not be a good fit.
I'm one of those
So-
candidates. I'm one of those superintendents. I'm in a district of 6,300, an ideal situation for me. I have no desire to go into a 12 or 14 or 20,000 student district. I can still talk to kids and get to know kids and get to know parents and be in buildings every week. And I see Urbana a very similar environment. 4,500 kids, that's perfect for
You
superintendent.
We
will
like to
also
think of
find-
ourselves as a destination district as
Right,
opposed to a
right.
stepping stone.
You also
We-
have
we feel the same
a
way.
difference, there's a different skill set when you go to a larger district or a more urban district than when you're in a small district. I stayed 19 years in my last district, which was over by Quincy. It was a good fit for me. I was able to do a lot of things. We moved the district. I could have looked for higher paying jobs, bigger districts. That's not what I wanted because I felt like I was effective where I was and it was a good working relationship. What I can tell you is that in my job, I was the transportation director, the technology coordinator, the food service manager, the bus mechanic. I mean, I'm not the mechanic, you know.
She probably could, though.
Maintenance director, you know. I did almost everything. I did the budget. I did, I was the finance manager. I was everything, okay? Now, if you take somebody from the Chicago area,
I got assistants,
Kevin,
yeah.
okay, he's got assistants doing all that stuff. So I might be able to go up there and be successful. I doubt that he could come down.
Oh, she's
I'm
right.
saying down
Yeah, I
and be
couldn't do that.
successful because he doesn't know all that stuff. So climbing up the ladder isn't necessarily what it used to be.
It's the fit, it's the fit.
And I think you're also going to have, it's very advantageous that you have two other positions that you're going to be hiring. And this individual's going to have the opportunity to build a team around him or her.
Right,
Right.
right.
Have you ever seen a repeat candidates that just every time you're doing a search, they're,
Yes,
throwing
have their
something in?
application in every
Yeah,
time?
And
Yes.
is there ever a point where you just have to tell them, I've got to rotate you off because,
We
or do
we
you
don't ever
look at them?
rotate anybody out.
It's against the law to do
because-
that.
Oh, okay.
First of all, we can't do that, but second of all, what would happen if they applied for 19 of our positions and, they never were the fit, but on the 20th one, they just happened to be the fit? So we're not going to tell anybody no, but we might not consider seriously the people that just routinely apply for everything because we've interviewed people before, and one of the first questions we ask is, tell us what you know about Urbana. And if they sit there and say,
Starts with you.
well,
See you- see you
I think it
later.
would be a good district. They haven't done their homework,
One of the key things for a good fit is doing your homework, it
Yeah.
shows some interest.
Yeah, we want somebody who's
To that
interested.
end, what do the three of you currently know about our leadership change, about Urbana in general, and what can you do to combat any potential negative perspectives or we want to, I guess, make sure that our candidate pool has any concerns, addressed that they might have coming in. So how would you go about selling us?
That's the exact reason we have those focus groups, and we sit down and talk to you so that we can find out exactly what's going on so that we can get the right person who has the skill set to work in whatever situation you're in. We read the news media. We've done some investigating, on what's been going on. We don't know all the details, but we've got a pretty good idea of what's going on. There's a lack of trust there in some hiring issues, in some leadership. We don't know exactly what all's gone on, but we know that you've decided for whatever reason to make a change.
Transparency, you mentioned earlier.
Right? Transparency, we're very transparent. We're going to look for people when we find out what the real issues are. We also know about your discipline issues that are going on with the restorative justice program and that kind of stuff. We've taken a look at your report card. We know what your achievement levels look like and where
The
there
gap
there are
between the
some
middle school and
gaps,
high school, we know that's a challenge. We know that you're a Tier 2 evidence-based funding model district. So we know some of your, on paper, challenges, but we like to think that we're good listeners. When we sit down with you at the planning meeting and listen to you one-on-one or one-on-seven, we'll get to know some of those details and be able to craft a response to your question in a much broader sense.
And we don't want you to think that your issues necessarily will scare off a candidate pool.
No, I
Is
don't think so.
Sometimes your issue is exactly what somebody's wanting to work on.
I
It's
would think,
their-
yeah, I
it's
would think this is
their-
an open door. You get to
baby.
hire 2 assistant superintendents along the way, and really if you want to make a transparent, trustworthy, focused leadership change, this is a great opportunity for that person, whoever that person is.
And I think I'm coming at a perspective too, where I've been an assistant superintendent for teaching and learning prior to my 6 years as superintendent. So I was 4 years in that role in the current district that I'm in a good-sized district. So I look at your academic performance in ELA and mathematics. I look at your achievement gap. I look at your 15% mobility and your 92% attendance, but then you have 30% that are chronic truants. And those are the conversations that I'm interested in having with candidates and vetting for the board from the educational student achievement aspect. Because again, I think discipline is impacted by engagement and student achievement and by what's going on in the classroom.
70% poverty rates and things, those are challenges for a school district and a
So-
school leader.
And
But
we're a,
good leaders like challenges.
we're a majority minority district
Right.
as
Right.
well.
You're about one-third white and one-third African-American, but approximately, but you're a
That's
little more.
correct, that's correct, and one-third
Yeah. I mean, we've done our
Asian.
homework, we know your
Asian
district
and-
pretty well on paper, but we want to have these conversations.
Asian and Hispanic.
We also realize that you have a university here, and that puts another layer of, color into your district of, somebody's challenges. University districts, towns have challenges, they're unique, that, aren't like other districts of 4,600.
Well, as I mentioned, this is the first time we've done an external search.
Uh-huh.
The last two administrators, one of which, oh, yes.
I was just turning
is
around to
that,
see-
Those are hand signals, yeah.
is that we promoted from within before the prior
Right.
administrators left.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
This is a new experience for you, and we're happy to help you and guide you and work with you on this experience.
The last statement I might want to make for us, anyway, unless you have other questions,
Well,
is that,
do any other board member, if your statement is a closing, let's,
okay.
any other, the next one starts at 6:45, so we actually have.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah, no, I don't.
Go ahead.
Any other board member have a question? Peggy had submitted a lot of questions. I hope somebody's looking at them besides me.
Was somebody in charge of doing
I had just one other
Well,
thing to add.
go ahead.
that? Okay.
Peggy had one question specific with regards to the overall cost. Other firms had broken down the fee per position, whereas you have the 28,000. If you had to break it down, then could you tell us that?
Oh, gosh, I don't know.
I don't know how important that is, really.
I think it would probably, I don't know if I could answer that. I think it would probably would be,
You could follow up with us later on that.
yeah, I would probably have to do
Give
that.
us a chance to think about that. If we come back and do a planning meeting with you, we'll do our best to break it down.
And the other one is, the district is looking for a superintendent who will support our racial equity goals. It's
Mhm.
it's an absolute must.
Mhm.
So how will your search process help identify candidates who have demonstrated ability in achieving that?
That's going to shake out in the development of the profile.
So it might be,
It's gonna-
it might be one of the
it might
bullet
be
points on
the-
profile that you need experience in that kind of endeavor in your previous superintendency or assistant superintendency or whatever your previous job was. And we'll ask for them to demonstrate the fact that they have ownership over that endeavor. We think it's an important consideration.
Yeah.
So that's just one element of the profile that we will develop in conversation with you, the focus groups, the survey, the open forums.
And I think you've addressed most, actually, this list that says is Peggy's, it's actually some of us cribbed onto her email and added to, so this actually represents several of us. But a quick answer. Communication with the board during the entire search process.
Okay,
Do you do
yes.
email, do you?
Yes.
How's it?
We will ask for a board liaison and then a district office liaison so that we can work with the district office person in the logistics of setting things up and communicating. And then if the board person is the president,
That'd probably be me, yeah.
usually, doesn't always have to be, we will communicate constantly, phone, email, text, face-to-face, however it works best. But we're constantly in communication with you.
And then, what do you view as superintendent, a candidate's visit to our community? They're usually, do you have them here for a whole day? Where part of it is various groups interviewing them, if we do that widespread? And then, what would be the rest of the visit during the day look like? What
Well-
all do you like to see included in that?
So when we are interviewing potential candidates face-to-face, we will find a place here in your community.
Oh,
so-
you actually do that here, not
Yeah.
someplace, you
We'll
do
do
that
it here. We'll do it
physically here?
Because we want those
them
candidates
get
to
know the
come here.
community, get to know your space.
Now,
We
we're not
want
gonna-
that done here.
We're not going to tell you where we're doing it, because we don't want everybody camping outside the door looking to see
Oh,
what's
he looks
coming, you know?
good. She looks
Yeah.
good, yeah.
But we will do it somewhere here in the community so that they can actually come here and, have time to drive around. The interested ones are going to bring their spouses if they have them. They're going to drive around and look. They're going to eat in your coffee shops
Walk
or
around realty
restaurants.
shop, or realty,
They're-
you look
yeah,
at what homes.
They're going to,
It's fun, it's interesting.
they're going to interview you and,
Sure.
and look at you just like you're looking at them. It's a two-way street. It's gotta be a marriage, okay?
And so this
When-
is a blind
when you-
interview, so the
When you're interviewing,
community can't, for instance, see me walking around with somebody strange and think, that must be one
at
of the
that
candidates.
point,
At
yes.
that point,
At
yes.
that
At
point, yeah.
At that point.
Now, when you get to the 3 finalists, at that point, then we will build in time for that each person to spend time with Dr. Williams to, be able to ask questions or maybe go visit buildings because they've already been announced.
Yes.
So people will understand that, here's one candidate, here's a second candidate, here's a third candidate. If it's a confidential search all the way to the end, we can't afford to do that.
Correct. Thank you.
Just want to leave you, unless there are other questions.
Okay.
Ann?
When you're doing the fee breakdown, do you factor in translation services? Because we have 2 dual language programs in French and in Spanish, and we want to make sure that we do outreach for those communities too who might not be able to be fluent in English.
Okay, translation services
Well, for questionnaires or, surveys that you
the
submit
survey,
online.
we already have them.
all that kind of stuff.
Translated for survey.
Publications that you might put put out there for our community members to respond to. I was just wondering if that's included in the fee. And I know Spanish is probably standard for a lot of search firms, but French is also another one of our.
I believe we've got French and Spanish both. Our
Okay,
survey
good.
is already translated into Spanish and French.
I'm pretty sure that's accurate.
Okay.
We'll double check.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I had just a couple extra ones. What kind of follow-up do you do with your districts once the successful candidates have been hired? Do you come back and do you interview people 6 months down the road, a year down the road, or whatever to see how things are working out?
Or at least check in with us.
Yeah, check in with the board.
We haven't done anything official. We do keep in touch, with boards, not on anything official. As far as board superintendent relations, we also provide that service, but that would be another contract, if you wanted us to come and help you,
Do some
develop
goal
that
setting or do
relation,
some
do some
strategic
goal
planning,
setting,
we
do
do
some
that kind of
strategic
work.
planning type
That's
thing.
not part of this contract.
Okay.
If the superintendent would happen to be a new superintendent, my services from IASA, I'm a field service director, and that's what I do. I mentor superintendents. Not only new superintendents, but veteran superintendents too, so those services are available if the superintendent is struggling with anything or just needs to have somebody else to bounce things off or talk to. That's at no charge to the district.
Informally, board members have called me even 1 or 2
Yeah.
years after the fact. Superintendent candidates that I've placed have called me a week, a month, a year after, asking about this question or that question. We're good at that stuff. We're
Okay.
happy to maintain those kind of contacts. It's all about relationship building as far as I'm
Yeah.
concerned.
Yeah.
And I have one last question. I'm
Sure.
sorry, I'm done. I know, okay, so you discussed the criminal background checks, but what about background checks about people that you've read about in the news, about people who have had open investigations about them?
They aren't going to make our list.
And, I mean, that's good to know, but I mean, I've heard about people leaving a community. It's happened locally where they've left the community, got a job elsewhere. The people they went to were not aware of any complaints or investigations against them that were ongoing. And, we want to avoid that, but do you
Exactly.
include that as part of your
That's a part
checks?
of our vetting process.
Okay.
That's a part of our job.
That doesn't happen with our firm.
We're
It
not,
has
go-
never
we're,
happened
we're
with
not
our
going to bring you, we're going to make sure that when we bring you somebody, they are just about as squeaky clean as you can get.
Great.
Or like I said before, if there is something, I'm not talking criminal now.
Sure.
Like, something else, we will know what that is and we will explain it to you before you even decide whether or not you want to even talk to that person.
Okay, thank you.
Just like to leave you with our 96% success rate. No firm in America can touch that. Our guarantees, we've never had been sued or had a board asked for a search to be terminated, not once. We'll find you a new superintendent if, for whatever reason, you become unhappy within 24 months of the placement, and we'll do the research again for no additional costs. Our credo is very important to us. As far as I'm concerned, this whole thing is about the kids. And if these kids get good experiences in the classrooms, then we've done our job and you've done your job, and we'd like to partner with you in that regard. We're educators at heart.
We would ask you to contact our references.
Please do.
Ask about us. The superintendent ones are listed on page 8. I know there are some that are around here, like Springfield, Danville, Moline, we just got done with Rochester. Several districts of like your size are in the central Illinois area that we've done. I actually was on all of those searches. So we asked you to, check our references.
Check us out, please
Glad for you to
do.
do that.
The 96% rate, how many years has your firm been in existence?
16.
16 years.
And this 96% is the composite of all those years?
Exactly right,
Okay.
exactly right.
Now, you will hear a very similar process probably from all firms. There will be some differences, to approach, to cost, personalities of who you're going to be working with. So what we would leave you with is we're looking for the best match, because that's almighty important to us. It has to be a good fit. We recruit, so that means we can go out and handpick the best. Sometimes the best superintendent candidate
Even if they're not looking.
is one who wasn't looking.
That's right.
And, it's like, you
That is
have
correct.
exactly what we're looking for.
Mhm.
Would you be
And
interested
we're-
to come and talk
we-
to us?
we know how to
We
do
do
that.
that. We
Mhm.
do that. And then, our reputation, just, we're proud of it.
Check all these
Proud of
references,
it.
please do. We'd like you to do that.
All right.
If
Thank
you have
you.
any
Thank
questions later, we're available.
you.
You've got our contact.
Board members, we
information.
have 5 minutes to fill out your form and be ready for the next interview to start. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hi, nice to meet you. I'm John. Yes, yes, I'm John.
I grew up right by here, so I'll
Oh.
tell a little bit of story, so.
Hello.
I'm Mary.
Nice to meet you, Ruth Ann Fisher.
Brenda Gardner. Brenda.
Brenda, oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
So where did you grow up?
St. Joe Ogden.
Oh, at St. Joe.
Yeah.
Right over there.
Spartan.
They were a big rival for me. Rockets,
Yep.
ooh, big time rival.
John. Yes. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
Yes. Hi, nice to meet you.
I'm not from all.
Okay, that's fine.
Pretty good. How are you doing today?
Sure. Thank you. Missing tonight.
Did she get a folder?
She did.
No, not this one.
Get my glasses. Folks, we've got a couple minutes, so if anybody needs to use the bathroom, that's, my recorder's not on, so hopefully that's not on the television tape.
There you go. turn off the projector since we're not gonna use it and save your bulb? I know that's pricey.
Yeah, we will, thank you.
Surely. Probably do this.
Yeah. Oh, it's turning it on. I think we will start at 6:45. Okay. Oh, that's okay, no big deal. It goes on and on. It's 6:45, let's go ahead and get started. So we'll just turn it right over to you and
Great.
head right out.
Thank you. I'm Mary Fosbender. I'm with Rain Associates. I have been with them for about the past decade. I'm a retired school superintendent in the Chicagoland area, in the suburbs. I started out as a French teacher, and as I mentioned to a couple people, I grew up just a little bit to the east of here in Ogden. My superintendency was in a town where they asked me if I understood small towns, and I said, oh, yes, I do. So I know the area very well. I have a lot of family here, and I look forward to the opportunity, and I want to thank you for your service on the board. This is absolutely the most important thing that you're going to do as a board member, and we fully recognize that. Prior to me becoming a superintendent, I worked as an assistant superintendent, and that was for 13 years, and I did HR largely in curriculum. So I don't even know how many people I've interviewed over my lifetime, but a lot. And it's important work, and we know that, and we want to do the best by you if given the opportunity.
Good evening. I am Bob Hammond, and I'm also an associate of Ray and Associates. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. Just a very brief background. I have been in administration for at least 47 plus years. I started out when I was a teenager, so that kind of marks my
He's the
tenure.
youngest principal I've ever met. Really?
I've done everything from teacher to assistant principal, high school principal, assistant superintendent, and then upon retiring, I did a number of interim positions. I'm also an adjunct professor for Olivet, and when I don't have anything else to do, I'm vice chair of the board of trustees for Kish College. So I keep active, and I've also been involved in a lot of searches. So between Mary and I, we would like to think that we bring a very lengthy and varied resume to the table for searches.
What we're going to try to do in front of you, you have a booklet that's yours to keep because they all do look alike. You might want to put your initials on it somewhere. But we're going to try to go through in the time that we're allotted and also afford the board the opportunity to ask us any questions. This is your search, and so if you have questions in the midst of one of our comments or something that we're pointing out, please do feel free to ask us. We want to get your questions answered whenever they may, pop into your head. So we're going to start on the right-hand side of your folder on a document that says what sets us apart. We made a conscious decision, although we do have this on a PowerPoint as well, that we're going to do it just by walking you through it in essence and pointing out some highlights. Some people wonder where Ray and Associates is located. It's in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and that seems weird maybe, but we're a national search firm and we do searches of very small districts, medium-sized districts like yourself, and very large urban districts. And we belong to all the national organizations. That includes NASB, AASA, School Board Association, ALAS, Latino organization, and various state and local. And we attend a lot of those conferences as well. So that's part of that ability to reach out and touch a lot of people. We've been in business since 1975. We are longer than any other search firm. And this is what we do. We do searches. We don't dabble in other things. We value the educational leadership realm. We do everything from principal searches all the way up through central office and superintendencies. So I think when you're in business for 40 years, that tells you that many things are going right. We also pride ourselves in the fact that we are a diverse group. We have about 160 associates all over the country that are like Bob and myself. And we have people that are board members. We have people that are former superintendents and assistants and lay persons, but have experience in education at the college and university level. And so those associates are how we end up with a very strong pool of candidates. We do something that I like to see, and it happened in my own life, on a very personal touch type of thing, where we're actually reaching out and not just sending somebody a flyer in the mail. We're contacting them personally and talking about your district and why we think you could be a match. So those 160 associates know a lot of people, and they are sort of the backbone of our organization. They've been with us a very long time as well. In terms of the next few slides, Bob's going to walk you through those, beginning with diversity.
Well, as Mary said, that we have a number of associates scattered all across the country, and our associates are tremendously diverse. We have a lot of women, minorities, and all of them provide different perspectives, and particularly when we get to review and prepare your candidates for interviewing and for selection. As far as the pool of candidates is concerned, for a district this size, one might expect or could expect a large group of candidates. I would say, 70 is not out of the realm. We could have maybe as few as 50 or whatever. It just all depends. But as we cast our net nationally, we would expect a very large group of candidates.
And something that we can't explain this year, because 70 is last year's average. It's a factual number in terms of all the searches that we completed. This year, that number is between the 40 to 60 range, and we can't explain it. We don't know why that is the case, but there aren't as many candidates applying in the searches that we're leading. That doesn't say they're not good candidates and very quality candidates, but the number is just shifted. So it's an interesting phenomenon. We'll be curious at the end of the year if that holds true throughout.
But we do pride ourselves on our ability to, as we say, to cast our net nationally and seek our associates to recommend to us individuals that might be potential candidates. So we will provide a very large pool.
The process itself is a key piece of this. Again, I'll reiterate that this is your search, but it starts with the board. One of the things that we do is, and we'll enumerate on each of these bubbles in the ensuing pages, but we'll get to know you as individual board members through individual board interviews. So that's a big piece. Then we'll work with your community, if you would like for us to develop a profile. That will include being on the ground here with both Bob and I, if we're selected as the firm, completing stakeholder meetings from every kind of group that you can think of, from people that are in the public sector to all the way to students. We love to talk to students as well. And then we go out and we start recruiting, and after that, we end up with determining what the candidate pool is. And that will be described in more detail as well. But besides Bob and I, there will be probably the national director and the president that would independently, along with he and I, screen that pool. And then we get on a conference call and determine if we have matches and where those matches are, to come up with what the slate would look like. Then, a piece of that is unique to our firm in the past 5 years, some firms are starting to do this in recent months, is we have the candidates that we've selected for consideration be vetted, and then they also have to do video response in an interview format. So we send them a video link, there's a question that pops up, and they have they have 90 seconds to answer each of 3 questions. Everyone that does it tells me it's quite nerve-wracking. The benefit to the board is threefold. One, it allows you to see the candidate but not pay for the candidate to have to come here. 2, it allows you to listen to what they're saying to the same set of questions, and are those responses meaningful and important in terms of the skill set that they bring to the table to what the needs are here on the ground. And 3, can they present themselves in a public type of setting in a stressful situation and look like they're at ease and that's not a challenge for them. So I think boards honestly love it more than all the paperwork we can provide. That's just factually true. Then we go to finalizing the search, where you would end up working with us, and we'll talk about how that would look in a little more detail. And then we have a piece at the end called Transitioning to Success. As a part of our fee, we'll explain what that looks like also. We have fully, highly qualified, full-time staff, so that takes the burden off of people here in the district that have full-time jobs already. They don't need to be doing all the work of this search as well. So that's an important piece, and I know that assistants that we've worked with over the years really value that. So in the board input, besides the individual board interviews, we ask you things like, are there groups that you think we should consider for the stakeholder group if you determine that you want to go that route and have that input? Again, Bob and I could meet over a full day, every hour on the hour, with 2 different groups running simultaneously in different locations, and we probably could end up with between, I would say, 15 and 20 groups that we would, hear from. There's also, as a part of that, an online survey. So if people are not able to come to those meetings, they can answer that survey online, and it's in multiple languages. You would need to tell us which languages you need. We can go up to 4 different languages with that. And that would be through the means of you having a link on your homepage, and persons clicking on it, knowing what the deadline is. If you have a robo type of dial system to get messages to people, you would inform them in PTO letters and that type of thing. But basically, all that input, and I would estimate in a district of this size, you would have a couple hundred or more people that would respond to the survey. You may even have a higher number because you have a lot of interest right now in what's going on with this. So, sometimes I've seen over 500, which is wonderful. So we would tally all that, and then we would share the results with you. And the survey is based on a research-based 33 qualities of a great leader. You're asked, as a person who's a respondent, to only pick 10 of those. It's not easy to do that because there's some really good ones. So the persons want to pick the ones that they think fit best for this district. And then we tally that. Every group is weighted equally, and we tell you, here's the top 10 or so. And that then becomes your profile of your district. And that's in part how we paper screen the candidates. We also paper screen them based on all the information that we pick up through the day-long stakeholder meetings and the board interviews. And we create an executive summary of topics that are key words that we're hearing. And that's very helpful to us because then when we're looking at candidates, we want to see that same thing. I'll pass this one around. This is Bradley Bourbonnais that I led a couple of years ago. So one side of that flyer would end up with what I would consider to be bragging about your district, celebrations of the district. If you have a fine music program, your athletics, drama, arts, your AP scores, different kinds of things that a candidate would want to cruise through and see in a thumbnail sketch. And then the backside includes this profile that the board has agreed upon. Here were the top vote-getting leadership qualities. And then it would tell the candidate how they go about applying, where they go, and what the benefit and salary package looks like. So That's basically the board input piece. Do you want to have stakeholder meetings? If so, what format do they take? And then personally interviewing the board, learning about the keywords with various topics, creating this, sort of matrix of words that are themes that we're hearing, and use that and your profile to paper screen the candidates. That way, we're matching. I liken it, and you'll appreciate that being in a university town, to a young person going out to select their college or university. They go to a campus visit, had it with my grown children. In one case with my son, we drove 3 hours to the University of Wisconsin. We got there, we were about 10 minutes there, and he said, "This isn't it." I'm like, "We drove a really long way, could we just finish the tour at least?" And he said, "Yeah, but I know this isn't it." So you all have to be the college accepting the candidate, and the candidate has to accept you with, whatever both of those bruises and bumps have entailed in them, but we want them to get excited about the fact that this is a place for them to spend a large chunk of their life, and it's important. Well, the next page, with regard to the profile, I hit a lot of the characteristics on that. The one piece I failed to mention was open public forums. So in the evening, we'd have an opportunity for, sort of a y'all come kind of invite for people to come. Sometimes those are, it's not a great idea to make them real late, because once people are home, they want to be home. I mean, sometimes 6:30, or 5:30 to 6:30 range is the best, honestly, after work and before you get settled in and so forth. So that would be up for you to decide what would work best in that regard. The next piece with recruiting, between what I mentioned to you about all the different organizations and conventions that we go to, the 160 associates across the country, we basically have a lot of range, and on our website, we get about 3,500 hits a month with applications expressing interest in positions that we have posted. So that's free as a part of our service. There may be other advertising venues that you want to consider as well, but there's a lot of free advertising that's out there in addition to our website. We will not come back and try to recruit somebody in that 5-year period that they're here, the first 5 years. A lot of firms will do that. We do not want to do that, and we've had good success in that regard. Our average candidate stays a little over 7 years. The national average is a little under 3. I think that's because of this matching that I described in that university pick analogy. I think we're very good at helping candidates, and Bob's going to talk more about the candidate pool itself.
Well, as Mary indicated, really the key significant portion of a search is the development of the profile. That is key, because we utilize that profile to match up with the candidates, and we can determine whether or not a candidate really does come to terms with your profile. Once we take a look at the pool, we will do a number of background checks and investigations. We will use all of the normal sources plus other sources. And for you to determine, we will bring maybe 8 to 12 candidates. That's a decision that you can determine on a number for you, for your consideration. And you'll have an opportunity to review their backgrounds, the video interview to the board. Also, I will tell you that at your disposal will be all of the applicants, if you would so choose to look at all 70 applicants as such, at least who they are as we begin to narrow them down. We will, again, do all kinds of checks. The last 2 words on that page, on page 13, says no surprises. We, as a search firm, firmly believe that we do not want surprises. You, as a Board of Education, do not want surprises. You do not want to wake up in the morning and in the headlines in the local newspaper about something that we did not know about. So we do checks. We not only check their current positions, but past positions, because we want to make sure that there's nothing out there hiding. And you'd be surprised, in some of these backgrounds, we discover quite a few things that would eliminate
A part of our
candidate.
fee also for your finalists, usually that's 2 or 3 people, is we do a complete criminal background check. Not only does that include, anything that would come up with regard to the arrests that have been made, but it also checks their undergraduate, graduate degrees, and also their certifications and licensures as well. So it sort of gives you the whole package, and that's just included in what we do for the finalists.
One of the things, Mary mentioned the term, your licenses. Particularly with out-of-state candidates, if they were to come to Illinois, we want to make sure that they have the certifications or they're in the process of getting certifications, because unfortunately, there are some districts who hire superintendents who don't meet the certification requirements, and then that sets off a whole new set of issues for
And
us to do.
what we've discovered this year, and that's at no fault of the candidate, but the State Board of Ed, as we know, has had cuts and cuts and cuts over the years. So the position that they've now taken this year is that they will not process a candidate applying to become licensed as a superintendent in Illinois until they've had a job offer. They can find out what all is required, and they can get all the wheels turning in that direction, but they won't go the second mile to make that happen. So that's just a reality. It's happened to me now, 2 of the searches I did before the holiday period. So I'm just giving you that as an FYI. And I think it's just based on, span of control and how much they can churn out, so.
As far as the board's selection of candidates, again, you'll have an opportunity to review the top candidates' files, their videos. We will help you in developing a matrix. We have a matrix scoring instrument which will help you as a board go through those candidates and begin to work your way as to who your top 1 or 2 candidates will be involved in the deliberation of how that matrix works and what the end results is. And then when you get down to interviewing the candidates, selection of 2 or 3 or maybe 4 candidates, and an interview process to be determined by you as a board if you want to solely as a board do the interviewing, or sometimes boards allow community groups. You have a meet and greet kind of a situation where they come and,
With the finalists.
Yeah, it may not be a question and answering, but how are they going to react to, and you get feedback. You don't ask the community groups to rate them, you just ask for feedback. Naturally, they're going to tell you who they like and so on and so forth.
Welcome to Urbana, that will be part of our process.
But we have a thing that we use there it's really effective. I've used it in a lot of university setting towns, actually, Madison among them, and it's called an impression sheet. It's just a little half sheet of paper, has 3 bullets on it, and has a little line at the top, please give me your first impressions of the candidates. And then they put the candidate name on it, and they just put a couple words or, short phrase, and then those are put into almost like a ballot box, so there's some confidentiality there. And then we from Ray and Associates bring them to the board meeting, and prior to final deliberations, the board just looks through all of them. So it's another opportunity for public input, and that's what we would have you tell the public as well, that those impression sheets would be something that would be given consideration before final decisions are made. It's optional, but I think it's in this scenario, I think it's a good way to, maybe consider going forward.
So how do you feel about the 3 candidates, when we get to the finalist stage? What level of public knowledge are you comfortable with?
Well, I don't think it's about my or Bob or I, how much comfort we have. I think it's about you knowing your constituencies. And I will say that most boards will take the approach that they were elected to do a couple of things. One is to hire a superintendent, and that is technically their sole employee, and to set policy and finalize a budget.
I'm a little more definitive than Mary. I think it's important to have your top 2 or 3 candidates meet community groups. Now, one of the issues you may run into is that some of your candidates may not want to be known as a candidate. And you as a board may decide, this is how we're going to proceed, and John, if you don't want
like
it, I'm sorry. That's just
You might
the way
lose a
it is.
candidate.
You may lose a candidate.
Right.
But I again, not so much for them to rank candidates, but to at least meet the public. I think it's important. It may not be important, I think in medium-sized districts and large districts, I think it's very important. It depends upon how active your communities are and your various PTOs and groups are.
I think we know that.
I don't think you're going to lose anything by doing it. And not only that, as a board, you can stand or observe how they react to that community stuff? Because they're the ones who are going to be out talking to those community groups.
It's definitely not something you would do at round one.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you
I
would,
understand.
you
Oh,
would,
no,
you would
no, no,
absolutely
no,
lose
no.
people. When the odds get better of landing the job, then they're more willing to take the risk in their home employment area, whether it's as a superintendent or a second assistant superintendent, to go forward and have their name get publicized. So you wait till that point. Another way to do it is to have, some of these selected community groups that used for the stakeholder meetings to be the representatives of the community, as opposed to kind of a pack the place night kind of scenario. So there's lots of different ways you can do it, and we have different formats we can share with you and let you know what could work here and might be successful.
And we can also help assist you in developing interview questions too as you go through the process. Once you go through the interviews, and we will help you make a final selection, and then as you begin to negotiate with your selectee, we will help with any of the contractual agreements. Usually, you'll have your legal firm or your counsel develop contracts. The candidate may have legal representation and back and forth, and we're here to assist on any of those kinds of contract things. We're not going to tell you what to put in a contract or what to or what not, but we're here to assist and bridge between you and the candidate.
To help you understand, and I know you're trying to get through to help you understand and the board understand that the last two selections have been internal. And the board did not go through a public process. It was the.
So it's even more meaningful.
The internal candidate was announced at the time we named them. But this is the first time we've done an external search. I said earlier 20 years, I think it's closer to 25 years, that this is the first time we've done an external search. And so I believe our community is going to be, not is going to be, they are interested in having in being aware of how we are going about it, and some knowledge of the person before.
Yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned internal candidates, and I don't know if there will be internal candidates or there won't be internal candidates, but you as a board can determine how we handle internal candidates. Our process is to handle them like any other candidate. However, you may have Johnny Jones out there who you really want, no matter what, to be a finalist, but we will do whatever you want.
Part of the board interview questions involved, do you have the names of persons that you would like to put forward, and are there any internal candidates? So,
I think in the interest of transparency, we would want any candidate to be treated just like any other candidate.
most boards will say they want the best candidate, and that's obviously logical.
At Ray & Associates, we will provide a 2-year guarantee on the superintendent search, and hopefully we will be able to abide by that. Then, as we go along and you employ your new superintendent, we will help provide a board assessment survey to see how you're getting along. And, if there are any issues or sticky wickets out there, we need to be coming in and help monitor the situation. But we're here to assist you to have a true, smooth transition and to make sure that things do work well and building your transition team.
I think that's something that's so important, because we would even do that perhaps in the ensuing months shortly after the person is named. So the candidate, would fill out the survey, every board member would fill it out. It involves key areas of governance. And we would then have you fill that out electronically. We would come back and spend an evening here with you, telling you what the results were, where the concerns were. Down the road, there's beginning a little crack right here. Maybe you want to work together before it becomes a pothole. And we would do this every year for as long as the person is still in this position. So that's just a part of our fee. And I think it's quite unique. And on the last page, it will tell you what are some of those tenets that are included in that. And I think they're important because it involves, roles and relationships. Boards have roles, and, administrative people have roles as well. How they build their team, how you as a board along with them would not only set goals but problem solve about what those benchmarks are going to be. A lot of community members really value having goals that are measurable. And if your strategic plan is at a point where maybe it, down the road in a year or so after this person arrives, needs to have at least a review or a renewal, that could be a piece of that. It also talks about board superintendent relationship and how you best work and play together in the same sandbox, which is very important. Community relations, huge piece, and fiscal responsibility. And then lastly, board development. So as board members turn over, how do new board members get immersed into what they need to know to be the most successful board members and support this new superintendent going forward? So those are some of the things that are a part of that. And I think I've done it a couple of times with boards, and I've been a little surprised that more boards haven't asked us to do it because it's inclusive in what we do. Then I want to switch gears just a second and ask you to look on the left-hand side of your folders, and you'll see the 3 proposals that we put forward. They're all laid out similarly, but I would point out in the beginning, you'll see a lot of different districts that we've worked with in the past. I gave you a handout letter that pertains more specifically to this larger regional area. It does have a table of contents, so you can review that. But as you look toward the back, and you get to page 15, so if you would flip back to that. Besides having a narrative about costs, boards like to have us break it down for them. So we have one of these for each of the positions. Our understanding is that if we were hired, we would work together with you to first select a superintendent, and then after that time period, that person and you would work together with us going forward to fill the other 2 key leadership positions as assistant superintendents. So we've roughed out some general numbers for you here, and then tallied what those would look like. Bob and I, neither one, live very far. We're not going to be having airplane rides to get here. It's just going to be riding together, and so you'll have a little gas mileage. For instance, tonight we're just driving back. We're not hoteling it or anything like that on you. My father was a banker, and I probably have my first penny still from that era, so that's how I function. And then, depending on what you decide to do with advertising, some people will spend money to have Education Week be an area that you advertise in. And you can talk to your administrative team here. It's surprising in this day and age, but that is the one education paper journal that's still very much looked at by administrators. And it would have a little box ad in it, and it runs about $4,000. If you just did the electronic version of it, it's included in our fee. So we can get to the nitty-gritty of some of that later, but I just wanted to point that out, why that could be such a horrifically high number. That would only be if you picked the paper Ed Week version of that.
And so, in general, without getting into the specifics, do you do a fixed fee, or do you do because I noticed at the top, consultant $100 an hour. Is there a not-to-exceed fee? Just generally speaking, how do you structure your fees?
Well, we're giving you rough ideas of what these things would cost us. We don't do a by-hour fee, but let's say that could come into play if you said, we want to have you here for yet another night, and it's not something that's included in our timeline. So it's an additional meeting, additional night, then you would run into additional hourly fees. But otherwise,
We're not trying to bid this, I just want to make sure that.
Yeah, I would say this is pretty inclusive, and we have had some boards tell us, we don't want it to exceed X. We even gave you a number in here just as a rough estimate, and I think it's quite high, but it could be there. If you had, for instance, a lot of out-of-state candidates in that paragraph below that number of 17,955, then you see $2,000 for the candidate to come and go and be able to be a part of the interview process when you get to the face-to-face interviews. I think that's high, but again, it could run that high if they're coming from California or, wherever. So that would be part of that. And then you'll see in this proposal also, back a couple pages that skipped over a proposed timeline. And the board would work together with us and fill in that timeline. That would be something that would be on your website. Again, transparency, your public would see it. They would know what the various stages were. That's on page 9. And we would just fill in the dates with you, once we're going to be starting the search and, various stages. So you would go from there. Bob's going to just take 2 minutes, if that's okay, and summarize our talking points.
Well, let me go back. I'm sure that as you develop your contract for your new superintendent, your legal firm will remind you, if you don't already have it in your current superintendent's contract, that you need to have some goals in that contract. So you need, as a board, now's the time to be thinking collectively, what are those 2, 3, or 4 measurable goals that you're going to want to put into that contract. Sometimes you'll find some boards who will say, well, let's wait 6 months or whatever, but I think if you talk to your legal firm, they're going to want those goals in there to begin with, so that person knows what they're going to do.
And in a multi-year contract, it has to be attached as an addendum, so,
By state, by Illinois state.
yes, that's
Yeah,
part
yeah.
of the code now.
Well, let me just kind of go back and highlight some things. First of all, I would like to remind you that it's your search, and we're here to help and work with you to find, as Mary said, the most important decision you're going to make, and that is the selection of a superintendent that will help you meet your mission and your vision of this district. We will customize it to how you would like to have it. Remind you that we have a very large networking group out there that will help us find candidates. We do not purchase, I'm losing my brain thought here.
Resumes, visas.
Resumes or data banks. We do not purchase them, although we do have on file a lot of resumes and people in a data bank. But it is a surprising thing about that is a lot of our final candidates don't come from that. They come
And we dump
from
that every
outside
year
and-
annually, so
and
it's
we do
refreshed
that.
at the end of, we have kind of 2 search seasons, fall, and now this is the second season. But at the end of June, that'll be all dumped and start fresh next year, so.
Again, I want to emphasize, just to repeat myself, that we will select or work with you in recruiting candidates that meet your profile. And again, I want to underscore the importance of developing that profile. That's extremely important. We will work with you, individual board members. We will work with your community and staff input. We will do checks, investigations on these people, everything from credit to police to everything else that we can find. We will help you as a board function in a way that you can build a consensus on your candidates and on your candidate. We would be very helpful in providing a diverse pool of candidates. And then again, as Mary had indicated, we do the video interviews. We will provide those for you to see, and our 2-year guarantee clause. And again, our job or our mission is to provide you as a Board of Education a service to get you in a position to hire the best person that is out there that will foster your mission and visions for the Urbana School District.
I always like to say, if at the end of the day, when we have this pool of candidates, and let's say it's 10 for round numbers that we present to you with their paperwork and their videos, and you narrow it down after you work together on this selection of the matrix and scoring system, and maybe you bring in 6, and you find it very hard to narrow it down further because they are quality candidates. And at the end, when you get to the finalist, if I hear boards tell me, wow, I could be happy with any of these 3 candidates or 2 candidates, whatever the finalist number is, then we feel like we've done our job. And that's what we want to do for you. Find you the best possible candidates that match the interests and the needs here, and somebody who will stay for the long term. Commit.
So
Questions?
unusual to this year, starting out the questions, is that in April, we have an election, and we have at least one board member that there'll be a change. So how do you accommodate, and we have we have sub-districts here, so all 7 of us run separately.
Yep.
And so we have the option of, at least we know we'll have one change. We could have as many as 3 total of 3. So how do you accommodate that changeover midstream?
Sure. With the board petitioners, so the people who have filed their petitions, one way to do that that's worked very successfully in several searches that I've done would be to have people that are in that position be included and hearing the videos, seeing the paperwork. The only thing is they cannot by law vote. So they can verbalize how they're feeling about the candidates, or you can take a different path and say, you know, we're interested in your impressions, but we're not interested in your ranking, you know, of the candidates. So you want to have that conversation, but I think the ability to include them in there, because then they're knowledgeable, and then they have to also probably work with your team here and sign some type of confidentiality letter, understanding that this is taking place in closed session, and what stays, you know, what is in that room and spoken about stays in that room. So those would be the steps. It's not a big challenge. It's just something that I think is very helpful to
So
people.
you have one board member who has chosen not to run. And so how
Correct.
many
Sorry, I wasn't on the
applicants
mic.
or how many candidates do you propose to fill that, run for that position?
1.
One. And are there others of you up for election? Okay.
Everybody on that side of the room.
And they- and-
Oh, okay.
And there's one opponent.
So-
There's one opponent for each
Each of
person.
those, okay. Okay, so I think it would probably be important, because your opponent or person will be on the board. It also, you need to take a look at your time frame, your schedule, because they're going to be elected in April. And you probably, I'm not sure you're going to have a superintendent ready by that election. So whoever, if you two come back on, hopefully, and the new person, they'll be voting probably.
That's correct.
In April or whatever. So they really need to be brought up to speed on this.
The new superintendent really values that being the process, because then they know that when they enter the position, it was based upon current sitting board members giving them their support.
All right, thank you. That's an answer. Good, thank you.
And I don't know your board. I'm going to make the assumption that everything runs smoothly and all that kind of stuff. But as a board, once you make that decision, it is imperative, it'd be very nice to have a 7-0.
We understand.
Vote on that. Now, I've been in situations where it's been 5-2. I've actually seen superintendents take a position that were on a 4-3 vote. And that makes you wonder about the superintendent, but also the board. So you really need to work on that.
Understood, thank you.
We've done a lot of, you know, homework already on your district, and as I said early on, I know the area very well. And, you know, I think we look forward to the opportunity to learn more. Most of the searches that we're involved in were on the ground, you know, several days over a period of the search. And I think we become very familiar with the interest. We're good listeners, which is an important piece of this. And we're going to share with the board what we find.
Paul, maybe your question that would be the appropriate first question out of the box that builds on what she was just talking about. How well do you know Urbana?
Well,
That question. And then we'll go back to it.
there's been things in the news lately, obviously, and there's, you know, running narrative in the press. So I guess, what have you learned about Urbana in compiling this proposal, and what would you do, I guess, to, when attracting candidates, to help us present an accurate and positive picture of the district, and also present the challenges as well, because we want somebody who's fully informed and excited about helping us achieve our goals.
I think that's one reason why you want veteran people that are doing your search, because you don't want the people who are representing the firm on your behalf to be able to have missteps along the way. I think we have learned a lot about some of the challenges that came about, and, you know, the board's actions, and that there was a lot of community pushback over those actions. The board, in our impressions and readings, is unified and has made decisions how to transition to the next phase of the remainder of this school year. And I think what you'll see is this approach is very much a consensus-building exercise, not only for the board, but for the community. Particularly if the board makes this collective decision, our recommendations to have stakeholder meetings, to plug people in along the way, and there will be an excitement that begins to build. I've had two of my most challenging ever in 10 years of doing this work, searches this year, in very similar situations. In one case, 3 board members resigned within a 10-minute period at a board meeting. In a second case, 2 of them were forced to resign, so there were also 3. And then I've done a search where it's a very divided community just recently. So I think our experience will bring that to bear. And certainly we can be challenged, but we're not very flappable.
Yeah, a reminder that, this process is a two-way street. Not only are you interviewing candidates, but they're also interviewing you, and they're going to probably pull up the newspaper articles or whatever else and see that. But I think as a search firm, it's our task to tell Ann that, you're a quality candidate. Urbana is a great school district. Here's a wonderful opportunity to do the things that you are inclined to do. And then when these candidates come in, boards, you can ask them, hey, bring us your 30 or 90-day plan for what you're going to do in here. How are you going to address some of the issues that you have had to deal with or anticipate dealing with? And you can get a flavor or a feel on where these individuals are from and what their plans are.
Yeah, because although recent press would lead one to think that there's a significant amount of disorder, the last time we did a national search for a superintendent, he was here for 11 or 12 years. And then Preston was here for 7 years as superintendent, and Don was here for 5 years as superintendent. So it's not a high turnover.
Well, one thing that
situation.
I failed to mention that you might find, invaluable, in the last page of the community survey, which staff do, and obviously your administrative team and the community and the board, there's a blank page, and it lets people just speak their mind. The only thing we do is we expunge any names off of those comments. But it is great reading for a board. It's also invaluable information for the new person, because it's a state of the state at that moment. And you may very well have validated in that information that it is a small cluster of people and that it's not a widespread sentiment. Or you may have people, just as I said, get wrapped up in the next thing and looking toward the future, which is what you want, obviously. Because my favorite pen that I wear on my lapel often has a circle of children, and in the middle is another circle, and it says kids first. If that's what our focus is, and it's certainly my intention, that's my mantra. If I ever write a book, that's going to be the title, then I don't think we can go wrong, because that's where we have to bring it back to, is children and what's in their best interest.
And both of those last 2 superintendents had nearly 30 years in the district.
Right. Right.
Ruth Ann?
Well, I did to lead on what we've just been talking about. What's your track record for having, people stay in the position? Do you have, and what would you do for us as a district if somebody, let's say we get to a perfect candidate and they don't actually take the agreement? They don't, can't come to an agreement with our district. What happens then with your search?
Okay. Well, I think we mentioned the average superintendent that we place stays a little over 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
National average is less than 3. As far as the working with the superintendent to negotiate, I think part of our job is to ensure that as we bring people forward, we're asking them, are you and your family committed? Because where that usually gets a disconnect is that him or her is all in and the other party is not. Or it involves children and making a move and switching school systems. And so all those questions are asked of us because they're valid. So we want this person to be someone who's looking for their next challenge and is all in. And at the same time, the other thing that can come up is, the board has to have a marketable number in terms of what the salary and benefit package is going to be, and that's going to be in that flyer that I passed around. We like for boards to put in the range of, and that way we can tell the candidate it could vary several thousand either way, so the board in their mind has a max, and the candidate knows that if they don't have sitting superintendent experience, it's going to be somewhat lower than that. If they do, then it could range higher, but not to exceed. So it usually gets stuck on those kinds of things, not so much the details of the contract language, honestly. Okay.
Well, our effort is not to bring forth a candidate or a candidate that you are going to select that at the last minute bails on us. Keep asking those questions here. This is a salary range. Is this in your, this is what you want? Is your family going to be okay? Are you ready to make a move? And as a board, you may have to think about moving expenses. That's another thing that you may have to think about. So I'm not going to say it will never happen, but boy, every step is taken to ensure that when we get to that point, it's going to be a happy marriage between you and that candidate.
I noticed there's 3 business cards in here, and maybe you said something and I spaced out, but.
Rick's.
Rick, yes.
Rick is our third person. He
So
wasn't
it will
able
be a
to be here.
three-person
It's a
team.
3-person team, yeah,
Okay,
and then the
that's-
president.
That's what I wanted to know.
Yep. Ruth Ann, did you have a question?
I had some, but I want to make sure, I went first last time.
I see.
Nominated, so I want to make sure that we weren't missing anything, because we did have a list of stuff. John can find something unless everything's kind of already.
Well, I could ask the same question I asked last time. So our district is looking for a superintendent who has experience in supporting will have experience helping us achieve our racial equity goals. Very important for this board and for this community in general. So what about your process would enable us to find somebody who has a demonstrated capability of achieving those goals?
Well, that's become a really important issue, and to that end, 3 of us from Ray and Associates this year went to the Council of Great City Schools conference, and that's largely made up of leaders who have had experience in that arena. Equity, challenges with regard to racial discrepancies, and also when it comes to what is happening on the achievement side with not drilling down and looking at all students learning. And we had made and have made personal contacts since that with a number of individuals that are right in that arena. And a couple of them, I think, are absolutely fabulous. And they're out looking right now, so.
If that is a key profile item, then that gives us the impetus to make sure that as we screen candidates, that we do have candidates that can meet or address that profile item. That's extremely important.
You know what, when I was in HR, I always liked to think of the applicant pool as a large pile. And, if you're the candidate, your goal is to get out of that pile into at least the next one that's a little smaller, and so forth and so on down the road. And one way to do that is to have yourself obviously separate from the rest. In our estimation, when we're as a team reviewing the candidates, for me, out of those 10 qualities and then what we learned from our board surveys on the key words, they have to tick off about 80% of those to get out of that big pile. And then we start drilling down further, and what else do we learn about this? I am never satisfied to know, particularly as a curriculum person, that they did wonderful things when it comes to equity and curriculum and what they did in that whole larger arena, only to find out that they had a wonderful assistant superintendent for curriculum and learning. And it really wasn't driven by them at all. So one of my favorite questions is always, is there someone that would have a differing view of this candidate than you do? Because we are required to contact at least a couple of non-references. We're all going to put down people that we know are going to give glowing remarks about us as a reference. So it's important to drill down further, look at previous jobs, what's their record there, and at the same time, talk to people who are not listed as their references.
Very, very few boards do this in this day and age, but it is an option. That, let's say you have a candidate that's 100 miles from here, and for a couple of board members to go and visit that community and walk into the coffee shop and order a cup of coffee and say, I'm thinking about moving here. Tell me about your schools. How's your superintendent? What's your tax base? What's your curriculum like?
That has become such a rare thing.
It's a rare thing, but it is.
really has.
It is.
Its
Now,
value.
if we have a candidate from Hawaii, I want to go with you. That's part of the extra, that's it here. But, you know, you need to make sure all the Ts are crossed and the Is are
I think
dotted.
that's largely because there's so much information on the internet now, and so, but you've lost the personal part of that in
But the
his
last
analogy.
time we selected an outside candidate, that was exactly what we did.
Oh,
was
two
we
people go,
visited-
it's not an illegal meeting, you learn a lot, and you come back and share. Yeah, it's affirming, I think, among other things.
I'm looking at, we have one member that's missing tonight, so, and she had several. If I don't ask this question, she'll be mad that we didn't ask it. Do you give priority to candidates who are affiliated with the Broad Foundation or have attended Broad Academy?
The Broad Academy?
Broad.
Yes,
Right.
we do not give a priority. If they're a qualified candidate, they're given every consideration, just like any other candidate who would be qualified.
All right, thank you.
Anything else?
No, go.
Oh, okay.
If I think of something, I'll interrupt you.
When you're doing your searches, you cover, nonprofit, and public school districts, always,
Sure.
like the community. Again, yes. And, unit school districts, counties, so on and so forth. And
Yes.
Have you had success in placing a candidate in all these different realms?
Yes, absolutely. Certain counties actually are more on the line of dual districts, where you have an elementary district and a
Yes.
high school district. I know Champaign County has examples of that. St. Joseph and Ogden are just like that, along with Stanford and Gifford and some of the other things. So we've had experience with all those things, K-12 as well as dual districts.
As you get closer to Cook County, DuPage County, you run into the dual districts. Just because you happen to be a superintendent of an elementary district, that doesn't mean you can't be successful in a unit district, and vice versa with a high school district. Yeah, we've been very successful in making that kind of
I think
transition.
it's more about span of control. It's really hard to come from, to relate maybe if you've been in a huge, huge district and you've never worked in a district that's closer to your size, or you've worked in such a small district, you've never had a team under you and had to manage and build teamwork and that kind of thing. But otherwise, I think as far as whether it's unit or dual, we've had all of that in both urban and districts of mid-size and small.
And of your candidate pool, once the word goes out, where are you seeing, as a history, your percentage of female to male?
I've never, each search, I've never looked at it that way, but when it comes down to the pool of candidates, I analyze it that way. Based upon, who we've chosen, and if I think it's either because we've overlooked someone or we don't feel that we have good representation in all different diverse areas, I go back and I revisit it. Doesn't mean we're going to put another person in there just for sake of numbers. It's still going to have to be because they earned their way in. But I think I'm really cognizant of that from an equity standpoint.
As far as the district goes, in the saturation of your candidates, do you find that you'll get more within a 5-mile parameter, or anything that's,
We'll give you a
speaks to,
we'll give you a sheet.
100, outside of 200 miles away?
Oh, no, you'll get international. You might even have people apply from foreign countries, surprisingly, 1 or 2. But you'll get representation from probably almost all 50 states of the union. And we will share with you that information in a collective document that I think is very beneficial to the press, because they like data. And I think they find that interesting that that net was cast in that way.
First-time superintendent candidates, do you get a lot of those? Do they place right away? Do they go through a couple of different times when they're not part of the last 3 several times over or anything?
I think it is going to vary based upon the needs and interests of the board and the community in terms of that matching process that we talked about. I've seen numbers of people, even this year in searches I've done, that have been sitting in the second chair and were placed in the superintendency, and the board was very comfortable with that decision and felt the person was a great match. So I don't think there's a right or wrong answer in terms of, you know, if you haven't ever been a sitting superintendent, unless that's the interest here, because of where you are, what your needs are. Is it a feeling that you need to have someone that has that kind of experience to lead this district going forward?
As well as that person's academic qualifications. Whether they have a doctor's degree or not. Now, there are very successful candidates without that, but the community and you as a board may think that this is something that we really do need and want. And, you know, like assistant superintendents, or if I was a high school principal of a very large high school, I might be a very worthy candidate, but we'll have to wait and see.
I think that's a harder leap sometimes, is to make that leap from a principalship to a superintendency if you haven't done anything at all in a leadership team role. But if the district they came from or districts were structured in a way, or maybe a previous role had that, I don't think it's a problem.
You need to check the background to see what they have done as far as student achievement for students, programs that they've worked on and developed.
How often are you seeing someone already being a superintendent, X amount of, you know, years down the road, they pop back up on your radar because now they're ready to move on? Or move up the ladder, or go bigger?
Yep.
Or wind down for retirement?
I don't see as often winding down. I would have to ask them, is this a question of not having enough gas in your tank, or, you know, where are you with that? Sometimes it's for family reasons, they decide to make a move. But as far as the winding up, I think this is an anomaly with maybe some of us who've been superintendents. But people who have been quite successful as a superintendent and everything is running really well in their current district, often, if we approach them, are ready to make a move because they think they can go somewhere else and help kids again. And they realize things are pretty fixed where they are. And so they're looking for the next challenge. And it's more often about that, or making a move to the next higher, you know, number of span of control in terms of students and staff and so forth. But rarely do you see it the other way, where they're winding down, unless what we see a little bit of is people coming from other states wanting to get a second pension. And I have to ask that same question. You know, how much energy, how many fresh ideas do you have at this point in your career to come in here and make that difference that is of interest to the community and the board?
I'm not saying this is good, bad, or indifferent, but in the back of our minds as we work our way through the pool of candidates, we would try to assess, is someone looking at Urbana as a stepping stone to some other larger district or whatever else? So, you know, that stays in the back of our minds to keep looking at that.
Is that generally a good or
Not
a
really.
bad thing?
Well, it's hard because then the longevity comes in when, you know, it's going to take 3 to 5 years to turn everything that you'd like to do around. And, you know, not everyone, including myself as a teacher, was like, yes, I would love to change that and all that I've worked on for the last 10 years. You know, people can't just come in and dump the wagon. They have to listen and learn and determine, sort, you know, what's working well here, what do we need to tweak, what do we need to really take off your plate because your plate is already imploding, but put something that has more fidelity for kids, and we can follow the data better and determine where we're going more, those kinds of things. But coming in and just, you know, making sweeping changes is probably going to get you not a lot of success.
True. If you have a candidate that comes in and says, oh, and by the way, I want to bring in some of my own people for different positions within the district because I know they're going to be great, is that a big red flag?
Well,
at
it's not a big red flag in really large urban districts, because that's an expectation that you're going to get to pick your leadership team. Most of the districts that we work with, that is absolutely not the case. Most districts don't have the money to either go through whatever it would take to have the persons that are currently there go away, out-counseled, you know, whatever you want to call it, and have that person have the opportunity to start fresh. In this case, that's kind of already where you are. At least a couple of people are going to be a part of this new team. So I think that's great, but it's not something that I would ever have a candidate expect as a given.
Can we build upon that a little bit in that you have the two other brochures with the two other positions and how you see if you were retained to do all three searches, how you see them meshing?
Well, one thing I think Bob and I and Rick would need to learn more about the job description. I mean, this is an opportunity if you, as a board and the new person, decide you want to change the structuring of who does what and how they best serve students. This is a golden opportunity to make that happen. Sometimes that's not necessary, but sometimes there's more efficiencies, if you will, if some different things fall under that person's purview, because now you have the chance to do that. So that would be number one, have the board and the new person determine what those are, and then going forward, matching again up with that. What are the lists of things that this person needs to do? Who are the people that we believe have the skill set to match with those interests? And then, obviously advertise accordingly.
Provides us an opportunity to multitask. Assuming your timeline, let's say you had a superintendent selected in April or whenever to come on board, and I'm assuming your two assistants, you would anticipate them coming on board at least July 1st or whatever. So one approach would be to, as we are beginning to wind down the superintendent candidates, to begin the process of the assistants, at least developing the pool of those candidates for those specific jobs that you have. And so that once we get your superintendent selected, that pool will already be there, and collectively as the superintendent and as you as a board, as you choose to be involved in the selection of these superintendents, and I'm just going to make the assumption that you're going to want to be involved.
For the assistants.
For the
yeah.
assistants or whatever. But I think the initial beginning of the process could also begin, I'll say, in March or wherever, to at least get the pool. You can't
especially
wait
the
till
job
you
part.
can't wait till the superintendent's on board to get these two assistants. So we got to do all three at the same time.
And maybe some of your key people here now that are part of your transition team can assist the board providing information as to whether what those two individuals are doing now as job descriptions, is that sufficient? Or does that need to be somehow merged or tweaked or shifting roles and responsibilities so we can best serve, the needs of the kids and the staff?
One of the questions you would ask the candidates for the superintendency is, look, we're also in the process of hiring two assistants, and we've already developing the pool. So, Ruth Ann, what do you think about that? You're coming into a position that you're going to have some input on to assistants. And this is how we perceive you being a part of that selection process, and gauge your superintendent's candidates, their opinions and views on this.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, I am complete if there's still.
Okay, other board members? Questions? I do.
Oh, no, go ahead. No, you didn't, because you. I've forgotten to ask this earlier, and I'm sorry if you kind of covered it, but when you are doing your interviews with the candidates, community members, especially, if they are sitting superintendents, do you consult with the teachers' unions in their district for feedback on how they're performing? Do you consult with or check with, say, any other community organizations? I mean, Urbana, we're fully linked in with our council, our mayor, our park district, our health department, all those people we have connections with, and we consider that really important as part of our community, that we're all connected with each other. So do you conduct surveys, interviews with the people in those communities to find out how that superintendent has been performing?
That's usually going to fall into the area of a non-reference.
Okay.
Because they wouldn't automatically list them. But that's actually, if I can make connections with their current union president, I love to do that.
Okay, good.
It's not always feasible, but that's a great person to do. The other thing is, if they have had experience working in some kind of partnership that you're describing, where you're with, maybe all your civic leaders and maybe some business and community leaders, and you've created this partnership, what are some examples of what you've done with that, have done in that arena, and then I can get names as a result of that and contact people that way.
Okay.
This community values community involvement, not someone who's going to sit in the office behind a desk 8, 9, 10 hours a day, 6 days a week or whatever. The demands of the Urbana School District is we want someone who's going to be community involved. And tell us, in your community, how you were involved. Were you a member of the Chamber of Commerce? Were you with a service club? How did you deal with the county board? Whatever else. We need to know those kinds of things. To answer your question, yes. And also, getting feedback from the unions is extremely important. Although you have to take it with a grain of salt, just because, the unions don't like their current superintendent, that doesn't mean that person is all that bad. Sometimes it's good.
Thank you.
One last quick question, quick answer. What's your preferred methodology of communicating with the board through the process?
We like to have one person as our contact, and that person in turn speaks, relays the information to the board. Usually that's via email. It can also be by phone or text, whatever the board prefers.
And it usually depends upon, you as a board decide, but it's usually directed to the president.
Yeah. Okay.
You're it.
All right, thank you.
Yep, you're absolutely welcome. Well, thank you all.
I think we're approaching the end. Thank you.
I'm sure I'm not hitting the right button.
Just leave it. It's okay.
Lori, did you have a,
Thanks again.
Sure,
did
thank
you have one of these?
I think I knew your dad.
For Peggy? You got one up there, okay.
I was going with Fassbender, but,
No, my dad
no,
was Jim Myers.
Myers.
He was president of
Ogden
First
Bank.
National Bank in Ogden.
yeah, I knew him.
Really?
Yeah. I've been here a long time. I've been here a long
Just had a
time.
birthday yesterday, too.
Thank you
So much for that. Good question.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Let us know if you have more.
Oh,
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Brenda, you were
I'm tired. She worked with kids all day.
only the beginning.
Thank you. Do you have another one of these packets?
We've got it, we've got it.
Lori has it.
Lori's got it.
Yep, I've got it.
Thank you.
Pleasure meeting you.
Yes, thank you.
Is that hard?
They're in here somewhere. I encourage board members to get this filled out.
Peter Flynn.
John Dimmitt, nice to meet you. All right, thank you. Nice to meet you, John. Thank you.
Hi, Connie Collins.
Hi, Connie, I'm Ruthann. Nice to meet you.
Thank you. Okay, hi, Connie Collins. Good to meet you also. Wonderful.
Go for it. Seventh inning stretch.
This might be very similar to what we have in the folders.
Wondering, from what I was reading through. We're getting started in just a second. I'm good.
Trying to make sure I have everything in that I may need. How we doing, folks? We're actually on time if we start right now.
Okay. I'm good. You ready for this?
Yeah.
All right?
You gonna start talking first?
Yes, I'll start first, but then we'll turn it over to them real quick. Okay, I think we're ready to start with the presentation from our next candidate firm. Ready to go, board members? Ready? All right. We'll go ahead and turn it over to you. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. First of all, I'm Peter Flynn, and this is Connie Collins, and we're with Hazard Young Atia and Associates, and we're honored to be invited to come and present to you tonight. And we know you've had a long day, and we'll try not to make it a long night, and we'll share with you maybe for about 20 minutes or so, and then whatever time that you have left, answer any questions that you have. And of course, if you want to interrupt us and ask questions as we go along, that's okay too. But we know you've had a chance to look over our proposals, so we'll just share with you in the next few minutes what our proposal is all about and give it some of the highlights. And I will tell you that it would be our intent that if we were successful, that the two of us would work side by side with you throughout the entire search. It would be just the two of us, and we would be with you from start to finish. And that's the way we've done it. We've done it in the past, and we represent about 50 years in the superintendency between the two of us. And so we have that kind of experience, and we've both worked on searches before as well. And so we're not new to the process. We've seen it from both sides, as it were. We're going to follow even though we're not projecting the PowerPoint, we're going to, now we're on the third slide, and Connie's going to take over from there.
Okay. We've been learning about the school district by reading from your website as well as through social media and taking a look at other sources. And basically, we have been able to get a lot of information, but we know that it doesn't tell the whole story. So we know that there's much more, and so therefore we are really wanting to speak with your constituents and those within as well as outside of the district to learn as much as we can as we move forward. We are learning from the information, and we know about your commitments, and we also realize that there's a lot to learn from your staff, from your parents, your students, and your community. So your commitment is one commendable, as well as your mission for the school district.
And so we're still learning about the district, and we want to tell you just a little bit about the firm. And Hazard Young Atia and Associates have done over 1,200 searches over the past 30 years. The company was founded by 3 former superintendents, and Bill Atia is the sole surviving member of the founding group. And there are about 150 associates like us throughout the country. There are actually 3 divisions, if you will, a Midwest division and then an East Coast and West Coast division of the firm. And then there's a full-time professional support staff as well. And we're affiliated with a group called ECRA, which is an educational research company. They do data analytics and strategic planning. We do strategic planning as well. So that's part of the corporate reach. On the next slide, we talk about what the HYA difference is, and there are other firms that also have a national reach like us, but we do searches all over the country, obviously, and we use some research-based practices, and we'll talk in detail about some of that, but one of the pieces is the community engagement part, and that is based, particularly the survey, is based on about 25 years of research on successful superintendents. And that's been refined several times. And we'll tell you a little bit more about that process as we get in there into detail. We also feature what they call executive oversight. So one of the things that's been put into operation fairly recently is that we have people that we inform of everything we're doing, particularly Max McGee, who's the president of HYA right now. And he is well informed as to what we're working on, and he gives us advice and counsel as we need it, and assists us if that's necessary as well. So we've got that executive oversight. And then executive due diligence means that we do enlist a firm to assist us with doing deep background checks. Of course, we also do background checks on candidates early on in the process. Connie's going to talk a little bit about a general overview of the process.
There are 4 phases to the process, and we'll go into detail regarding each of the phases, but just as an overview, they're all customizable to the direction of the board. More details will follow on the other slides. There's the engage phase, where we learn the needs and the goals of the organization. Then we have the planning phase, where we are also planning the search and defining the search criteria. Also, there is the recruitment phase, where we actively recruit candidates, and we're able to reach out nationally to recruit candidates as well as within the state of Illinois, and identify the slate of individuals best suited to meet the needs for the school district. The selection phase involves providing assistance, training, and support for the board in selecting the top candidates for the search. And finally, the transition phase, which is a comprehensive background check, which is done, site visit, finalization of the contract, negotiations, and announcing the appointee. With the engage phase, there is a planning meeting which is scheduled initially with the Board of Education, where we're able to find out what is the calendar that you want to establish for the search and how you want to plan and what you want the search to look like. There are stakeholder groups, and we get input from these focus groups, whether they're individuals or if they're groups of individuals who come together, and we have a number of meetings, perhaps 15 to 18 meetings that take place with the groups. We also have a survey. It's an online survey, and I have found that in many instances, if people are not able to come to the focus group meetings, they have an opportunity through the online survey to contribute information regarding the leadership capacity and what it is that they're looking for in the next leader of the school district. A leadership profile is developed after we get all of this information, and that information is compiled by the search firm and then is brought to the board for your final approval before it is posted on your website, posted on the HYA website, and advertised nationally. And finally, with this particular, with the next phase, we have where we are also preparing the search, recruiting, including publicity, and we will be working with your communications department or individual to really get the information and be sure that everyone knows what is going on.
So we compile all the information that comes into the surveys. And in the surveys, we have two parts of the survey. One is we ask people to comment on the state of the district and give you some really good feedback that would be helpful in your strategic planning process. The other thing that we do that's a little frustrating is that we list the 12 competencies that show up most frequently with successful superintendents. And there's a paper in here in your packet. It's on effective superintendents, and it's a compilation of research of effective superintendents. And we boiled it down to 12 competencies which show up most frequently among successful superintendents. And that's the frustrating part of the survey, because people can only pick 4 competencies, the 4 that are most mission critical for your school district at this point in its history. And from that information, and also the listening sessions that we do, we've developed this profile that Connie mentioned and bring that to you. You approve that, and that becomes the basis for the rest of the search. That becomes the basis for the screening, the recruitment. And so the recruitment phase is really important. And it's important because frequently, the person that ultimately gets hired by a board has not been a person who originally applied for the job. As a matter of fact, I've been active in 14 searches over the last few years since I retired and started doing this work, and all but one fit that description. That is to say that 13 out of the 14 people that were ultimately hired by the board had not originally applied for the job. So the recruitment phase was really important. But more important than that was the profile that the board agreed to. When we brought them the compilation of what all this information said in the meetings and the one-on-one interviews with the board, by the way, then the board determines and edits the final profile, and that's the basis for going and finding people. And the way we find them is we ask them, can you do this job the way it's described? And a lot of people will say yes. And then we say, well, do you have evidence that you've successfully done that job? You have a track record. Let's say, for example, one of the things in the characteristics says that they've had successful experience leading a diverse school district. Can you show us increases in student achievement, including subgroups, over a period of time that you've led? And show that to us, that evidence. And then can you also tell us some people that can attest to the fact that that's your work that led that effort and not riding the crest of somebody else's work before you? And so that's the vetting that we do, but it's all comes back to this profile that the board has given to us and allows us to then advertise for people. In addition to advertise, we do a lot of networking. We rely on the 150 other associates like us that work for Hazard Young and T all over the country, and that is if you do want to do a national search, and that's what we would do. So that's pretty much what the recruit phase is. We do background checks. We look for them on the internet and in social media as well, and then we do screening interviews. And then we bring to you in the recruitment phase a slate of candidates. You determine the size of the slate. And usually if a board says, well, bring us a half a dozen people that we might interview, we'll bring them the half dozen, but we'll say, now here's number 7, number 8, and number 9, and why we didn't include them. And the board might say, well, we want number 8, so we'll do 7 interviews. Or we want number 8 instead of number 4. That's the board's decision, who you want to ultimately interview. And so that's the recruitment phase. And then we get into the select phase. By the way, in this part, we recommend 2 rounds of interviews. That if you have, say, for example, a half a dozen people, that you interview those 6 people over a 2-day period, not try to do them all in one day, but over a 2-day period. And then you use an interview script so that you ask pretty much the same questions of all the candidates. And the interview script will come from you, that you'll generate the questions, we'll make some suggestions. But again, it'll be based upon that description, that profile that you've agreed to. And we'll help you craft the interview and structure it and give that to you to use. We'll also debrief with you following those 6 and help you narrow the field down to, let's say, 3 people and bring them back in for a second. And we always recommend a more intense interview process for the second round. And that second round usually takes about a whole day or close to it, where you'd have lunch, a couple board members would have lunch with the applicant that you're looking at and spouse or significant other, and then you'd give that person a tour of the district, and then invite them in for a dinner. Following the dinner, do an in-depth second round interview. Again, we would help you structure that whole piece, and then the morning do a debriefing, usually with the president and vice president of the board, and then you can ask them, are you still interested, and if so, what would it take to get you here? So that's when you have 3, and then go through that 3 times, and then come together as a board, and we will again facilitate that discussion with you and help you get it down to the one person.
At what point and how do you involve the larger community beyond the 7 board members?
Usually on the front end, depending upon what kind of a search you want to do. If you want to do a confidential search, and we recommend a confidential search, and I'll tell you why. I mentioned that when we recruit, we find people who don't originally apply for the job. And those people, and I described the vetting that we do, those people are usually successful where they are, they're happy where they are, they're not looking for another job, and they have to know what a great opportunity Urbana would be for them to come and be the leader in this district. However, there are a lot of people that will not apply for a job if they know that they're going to jeopardize their status in their community, and if word gets out early. So, but it's up to the board. If you want us to do an open search, we can do an open search. There are some limitations to that, but we'd be more than happy to discuss that with you, the pros and cons, and look at that during the planning session.
What's your feeling when we're down to the last 3?
To
Is the
introduce
answer
them.
Is the answer you gave consistent when we're at the beginning, we understand the community role in helping to develop the position. When we reach the final 3, is your answer different than what you just gave, or do you feel that you're giving us the correct advice?
It's the board's call, because you know your community best, and you know what your community needs to have in terms of involvement. And so if you're down to 3 and you think it would be beneficial for the community to meet those 3 people, by all means, that's your decision. And I don't think that factor would necessarily scare people away from applying for the job at that point. If they're one of 6, it might be a different situation.
Got it.
But if they know they're being seriously considered and being invited back for a second round, then I don't think people are going to be as shy to allow themselves to have that exposure if you were going to have some sort of a reception or interaction event as part of that day-long process that I described.
All right,
Yeah,
thank you.
but that's when Connie said that this is all customizable to what your needs are and what you know about your community, we're serious about that. And we've done it in different ways in different districts.
I appreciate your recommendation. That I wanted to hear what your viewpoint was and what you feel is going to yield us the best candidate.
Yeah. And so, anyway, that's the basic process. When it comes to the select phase, we stay with it right through the transition. We help with what we call a success plan or entry plan for the new superintendent. We Also, will assist as the board needs to have assistance in the development of a contract. We'll also help with the site visit, which we think is a very important ingredient for the final person. So before announcing the final person, to do that site visit. And for a delegation of the board to go and visit that person's school district and to ask certain questions which affirm your decision. Not make your decision, but affirm your decision. By then, we also would recommend a deep background check by Baker Eubanks, which is a firm that we use, or another firm if you prefer to use a different firm. But that's all that Baker Eubanks does, and we'd be glad to talk about that at that point. Some people we had one district, as a matter of fact, East Aurora did both the Baker Eubanks background, and then they had their law firm also do a background check. But we think that those steps are really important in terms of making a transition, and I think I'll leave it at that in terms of the process, and we'll talk about a couple more things and then turn it over to you for some questions, more questions.
The next slide talks about communication, and we know that during any process how important communication is. And it's really important that we're communicating with you, and that in many instances there's someone who is designated who keeps in touch with the search firm and with the board so that we can really coordinate and organize everything. The portal includes templates. There are also sample questions for interviewing and much more. And that portal is available to the board members so that all of the information is being kept there within the portal so that you can look at applications, you can look at other information which has been stored there. We'll provide frequent updates to the board on what we're doing. We'll work with the board to develop the calendar. We talked about the calendar earlier so that we know what your schedule allows as far as meetings are concerned and what's the best time and when school is or is not in session. And that will go on that calendar will be developed for the entire process at the planning meeting. We'll provide information for your communication department and for the district website so that the community knows what's happening also. We recommend that the staff devote at least a page to the superintendent's search so that it also indicates to the community just how important this is for the district. We also will respect the preferred forms of communication that the board would like to use.
So, and our portal is something that a lot of people like to use, and it's available by almost any device. And if it doesn't seem to be working with your device, we can make modifications with the portal and particular access to it. But it's good because if somebody wants to go back and say, well, for example, if we do the planning meeting, when we're finished with the planning meeting, we write up what happened at the planning meeting in detail and send that back to the board by email, but also put a copy of it in the portal. And if you have trouble finding the email, you can always go to the portal. And you can always have somebody print out from the portal if you're not comfortable using that as well.
Okay. Our commitment, as it says on this slide, we are committed to working with the board in order to find the best candidate for the positions which you have posted. And even though we have gone through the process, I really want to emphasize that it is customizable. So it's not set in stone. If you want some variation on the process, then we are open to that, and we are available to customize it to meet your needs. So I'm going to go over the calendar.
So going to get to the calendar in a second, but I talked about the survey, and there's a copy of the survey in your packet. It should be in the left-hand side of the folder, I think it is anyway. And there should also be in there a one-page copy of the calendar, which is a little easier to read than the one in the presentation, okay? And so this is a possible or a sample calendar. This is not one that we're proposing, but it just kind of give you an example. The idea is that if you were to to decide in the next week or so. We would come back as soon as possible to do a planning meeting with you. And the planning meeting would outline the entire search. So not only put it on the calendar, but talk about the extent to which you want to have a confidential search or an open search, and the extent to which you want certain groups to be included in focus groups or forums or one-on-one interviews. We always recommend a one-on-one interview with each board member. Sometimes the interim superintendent is included. It depends upon who the board wants involved in those listening sessions, as we call them. And it takes about 10 days to set those up. And your staff is helpful in doing that, finding a location and a time which is most agreeable to the groups that you want included. And that's why we say between the planning meeting with the board and the beginning of the community engagement, it's a couple of weeks, usually. In this case, we took a week out of the calendar because we are both involved in a couple of organizations, one of which is the American Association of School Administrators, which is an excellent place. It's a national education meeting of all the superintendents in the country, and it's an excellent place to do recruiting. And we go to that on our dime, by the way. It's not an expense to the district. But within a couple of days of your selecting our firm, we can start setting up the planning meeting, and within a couple of days of the planning meeting, we can have the survey available to the community, to the staff, and so on. And we can talk more about that.
So this search is complicated by the fact we have an election in April. And we have there will be one new board member.
Okay.
And there might be as many as 3. And so how do you incorporate, what that means is we're going to be starting the search with one board, and we're going to be voting on a candidate with potentially another board.
Yeah.
So how do you integrate that process, that change, into the process?
I'm going to throw it back to you, John. Don't think I'm escaping the question, but let me show you a couple of scenarios that could work. One is that the interview process would take place after the election results are known. So you could do those 2 rounds of interview after.
Interview the candidate. Gotcha.
Interview the candidates after, so that you've got the new board doing the interviewing. However, I've also worked with a board where they literally did the first round of interviews with the sitting board, and then the newer board did the second round of interviews. However, the new members of the board sat in on the first round of interviews.
Okay.
So they listened to the questioning, they were in closed session, they signed a non-disclosure agreement, and stayed in there for the confidential front end of the search. So those are a couple of alternative approaches.
We have sub-districts here, so we know one new, Benita's not running again, so, and she only has, there's only one person running in that district, so we would assume that, yeah. And in the other case, we have the 2 other individuals, we happen to be on.
You're all sitting
Yeah,
on
we
this
are.
side of the room.
Yeah,
Yep.
but each of them also have one opponent.
Okay.
So it's a limited number of
Yeah.
potential
Yeah.
new board members.
And one of the things that I didn't mention is that when we present the slate to the board, which is on this calendar, it's done in public, except the names are done in closed session. But what we do is we do a workshop for the board on conducting interviews. Now, we know that you've done interviews before, but there are certain questions, it's important for us to let you know you can't ask questions about these certain areas. Legally, you can't ask them, and so we give you a protocol and an advisory in that regard. But that's all done in public, so, and that's before the interviews take place. And so if somebody's between, they could certainly sit in on the public part of it and listen to that. And then a few days later, if they participate in the interviews, they can do that as well. But-
Sure.
But it could, we could, I'm sure that you could do some flexible timing around the, is it the second Tuesday? When is, what's the date in April?
April 2nd.
So it's the first Tuesday or whatever it is? Yeah.
So the results would be known by April the 3rd, but people might not yet be installed as a board member. That usually takes a little while because certification has to occur.
Yeah, it's got to be done within 21 days or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so actually, this has board initial interviews the 26th of April, so that would be okay there. The other thing that complicates your situation a little is that we gave you a proposal for all three positions.
Right.
And so our recommendation would be, and this is on the calendar, is that early in March, that with your guidance and discussion, we would suggest starting to look at policies and job descriptions governing the other two positions, and whether any of that needs to be updated. And if it does, we'll give you some guidance and some assistance with that, but of course, that will be your decision to decide on what the policy is going to say and what the job description is going to say. Fast forward, we would recommend, however, that although you advertise once the policies and job descriptions are done, that you don't do the selection process until you settle on a new superintendent so that that individual can be involved in the selection along with you.
I think all of us would agree.
Okay. So we've outlined how that would work, that from March, I think I put down from March 1st to May 1st, we would do that policy, job description, discussions with the board on the other two positions. And then once you get down to the 2nd of May, use that time period in May and June to finalize the other two positions, if that calendar works, you know. But that's just kind of an example of why it's laid out for that. It's also laid out so that there's a little bit of leeway between the first round of interviews and the second round. There's a little time in there for you to take a deep breath, because you've been through kind of an intense thing with 6 people for a couple hours each, and now take a little breather and then come back for the longer involvement. Okay, so that's kind of what the calendar is, but it's all predicated upon the idea of getting your superintendent in place, and preferably the other two positions as well, by the 1st of July. Is that what you're thinking about? Okay. Okay. How are we doing?
So I guess this is a real detailed calendar. This is a good calendar?
It's a good calendar.
Okay, we're not rushing, it's not too
No.
fast to, this is.
No, this is not, no, it could be faster, but this is a good calendar because there's plenty of time to get the work done. It allows, from the time you approve the profile, it allows 5 weeks of focused recruitment.
Okay,
Now, the other kind of recruitment we do is sort of generic. That tells me that we've been talking for a little over 20 minutes. We're coming up on a half hour. So the other piece of it is, though, that there's time for looking at a good recruitment phase. As soon as we get the job, it gets listed on our website, and our website gets 100 hits a week from people who are interested in superintendency. Why? Because we list all the superintendents that are available, superintendent vacancies that are available in the country, whether we're doing the search or not. Some of the other firms don't like that we're doing that, but it gives them publicity too, because it sends people to their websites. So we get a lot of people looking at our website. So, and then we're using our network with a generic ad, but once we have you approve the profile, then we do the focused recruitment for another 5 weeks. So there's a good portion in there of time for recruitment, and that's important. So we didn't scrimp on those important parts. We also, like I said, you want to give about 10 days to let people know you really want to listen to them. You want them to come to public meetings, and we ask them the same questions in all the interviews and all the meetings. What are the strengths of the district? What are the challenges of the district? Given that, what should be the characteristics of the next superintendent to keep all those strengths and make them even better and to address those challenges? And then the fourth thing we ask is, why should somebody want to come here and be superintendent? And that's in the recruitment part, right? Because we want them to help tell us what's good about the school district and the community that helps in the recruitment process. And then the fifth thing we ask them is, if you heard any names that you think might match up with this job, let us know and we'll pursue them. So that's part of that process, but you probably want people from the business community, partners that you have, foundation people, that kind of thing. You want to talk, I'm going to skip over the next
Okay.
one because I think we've talked about the HYA difference enough. And why don't you talk a little bit about the school districts we've done?
There are, one of the slides shows you some of the school districts where we have done searches. I know I participated on the search for the Decatur Public Schools as well as the one with Huntley School District, and my former school district is Oak Park District 97, but the recent search of the superintendent who is there now, HYA, did that search. And so these are 6 districts that our firm has worked with over the past couple of years. And you can see, that Decatur has 9,000 students. In fact, I'm working right now on a search for an assistant superintendent for Decatur. So that is taking place at this time. Freeport School District has 4,100 students. It's a K-12 district. Evanston Skokie, 65, has 8,000 students. It's a K-8. Harvey School District 152, 2,300 students. Oak Park has 6,000 students. It's a K-8 district. Matson, 159. East Aurora, 131, has 15,000 students. So this is a list of some of the districts that we have worked with and done searches.
And full disclosure, I was the superintendent for 12 years in Freeport, and when I left, HYA did not do the search, and 2 years later, I went back as the interim superintendent, and then the board decided to have HYA do it, and I didn't influence them one way or the other. I don't think, well, maybe my presence did, but I had started working with HYA at the time. And I also worked on the East Aurora search. I'll just tell you some, I want to address some issues, but I'll wait until you ask us some questions. And there's our guarantee. We want you to be completely satisfied. We'll stay with you till the very end, until you're satisfied with the next person to be your superintendent. If anything happens within the first year, we'll come back and redo it, and we'll actually extend that for the first 2 years, as long as the board stays intact from the hiring board for the first couple of years. And we'll come back and do the search without a fee, but just for expenses. And then we will not try to recruit away. It says 3 years, and our practice is usually 5 years before we'll ask anybody. And then we always like to ask the candidate who is interested in another search that we're doing to ask the board's permission to pursue something like that. And then we have a price match for any competitor that does the same level of services that we do. Yeah, right. So, we're ready.
Issues that you want to make sure you cover, you just go ahead.
I'll wait until you hear what your questions are, and then.
Okay. I have a list of questions from our board member that is not present. And, Paul, go ahead while I find that.
I think they already covered the one question with regards to their existing knowledge of our district. You already referenced that. So, our district is looking for a superintendent who is going to support our goals surrounding racial equity. It's important to this board. It's very important to the community at large. So how will your search process help identify candidates who have demonstrated capabilities in achieving goals like those?
Yeah. And by the way, Freeport always looked at Urbana as a district of very similar demographics and similar size, similar issues. And so we're familiar with the equity efforts there. And what we would do is encourage you to make sure that that's upfront in the profile and very clear about the sense of urgency, which through your equity commitment statements, which we put in our PowerPoint, emphasizes how important that is to you and to your community. And we think that if it's there, then it's important to make sure that anybody that comes to talk to you can demonstrate evidence of success in that area. And that's we would put it in there and make sure that people have that evidence before we brought them to you as part of the slate.
Yes, I wanted to know, I can't remember if you said that background checks were included as part of your package. And does that include background, not just criminal background checks, but does that also include background checks into a person's ongoing investigations or any grievances that may not have been resolved at prior employment, things that may be still developing? I mean, I mentioned earlier that in this community, we've heard news about people who have moved out of our community. I'm not talking about this school district, but just locally, who have left the area and gotten another job, but there was an investigation still pending on that person, but their new employment didn't know about that, and it was kind of a mess. And so we want to avoid anything like that. We want
Sure.
everything to be transparent and completely open.
Right.
Do you include that in the types of checks you do?
Yes, and we start with the candidate, and we make sure that we impress upon them that it's important for them to fully disclose anything that's going on, any youthful indiscretions, any things that are ongoing currently that might eventually come out. So we start with that. We then do our own research on the internet. We look at social media. We always recommend that the person that you're finally considered go through this Baker Eubanks firm that's a Chicago-based firm, and they do a very thorough look at social media. They look at credit rating, legal suits. They look at all activities within the recent past, and by that I mean 7 to 10 years. And we think that that's really important to do before announcing a person as your choice.
Okay.
So, and the Baker Eubanks is not part of the quoted price. It's an additional price.
Okay.
Yeah. And that should be, that's included actually in here too.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you also then interview people who are not forthcoming in offering references for your candidates, like teachers' union presidents or representatives? Do you interview community leaders? Urbana is very, very well connected with our community, that we have partnerships with lots of public entities like the health department and housing or urban development, community groups like the NAACP. We want to know if you talk to the leaders, community members in those groups, to ask what your candidate has contributed to them or what kind of partnerships they've had with that district.
Yes, we go, we start with the application, and as you might imagine, almost every reference that's on an application is going to be a positive reference, which isn't bad. It's
No.
good to have that, but we always let the candidate know that we're going to go off application at some point. And the way we do it is, if we're doing a confidential search, we will call somebody who we think is familiar with somebody's work from different perspectives. And we will say, this individual has been mentioned as a possible applicant for this job. And then we'll ask them the same questions that I mentioned earlier. For example, talking about equity, what do you know about this person's initiative and ability in envisioning and successfully executing programs that improve student achievement for diverse groups of students. And we'll get that perspective that way. So yes, the answer is yes, and that's how we do it.
Okay.
We start with the references they give us.
Sure.
But we go beyond that. And that's where we also use our network of other associates, because we're fairly well, we had dinner tonight at the Courier Cafe, and we were talking about some ways in which we've been able to network with people over the years.
Mhm.
And it's been very helpful.
Good, okay. I can't remember if there were any other ones that I missed off of my list. Sorry, it's been buried. Do you also have a contingency for if a candidate gets to the final round but can't reach an agreement with the district on contract or anything else and they drop out? Will you still come back and help us, and we restart the search or however that needs to happen?
Absolutely. We'll be with you, and we hope that doesn't happen, because we want to know, we'll ask you a question, we'll tell you what some of the districts like your district, or a district that you want to be like, and what they're paying and how they're compensating people, so you can get an idea of what the compensation package looks like. We'll also make sure that people that apply understand that these are the limitations or the possibilities without giving them a specific range. Because once you give them a specific range, it always goes to the top of the range, right? You know that. Okay, so we don't recommend that. What we always recommend is that you advertise a regionally competitive compensation package. But to answer your question, yes, we'll stick with you. But we always recommend the second round have 3 people in it for exactly that reason. Because suppose the district now becomes public and the district says, you're applying for another job, what if we change your compensation, or what if? But you still then have 2. And if you get down to 2 and one leaves, you really don't have a choice, right? So we always recommend to prevent coming down, that you still have 3 good candidates for that second round.
Okay. I'm sorry if I'm monopolizing. And please forgive me if you've repeated this. I've been reading so many materials tonight and last night and everything. Do you offer, as part of your surveys, do you translate into other languages for the community surveys?
Yes.
We have 2 dual language programs here for Spanish and French. So we want to make sure that we reach those communities who may not be able to participate in your surveys in English.
Yeah.
That's included in the cost?
It is in Spanish. If you want a language beyond that, then it's $315 for translation, and it takes a while to do that, to make sure that we've got the current survey in French, for example, if you wanted that.
Okay. And lastly, how often, what's the longevity for the superintendents you do place with your firm? How long do they stay in the districts that you've placed them in?
It varies depending upon, so I started doing this in the latter part of 2012, and worked on 14 or 15 searches, and with one exception, they're all working in the job where we help place them. The one exception is in Houston, Texas. I worked on that search, and that person stayed 1.5 years, and New York City recruited him to go to work out there, and that's where he went after 1.5 years. Well, it was almost 2 years. Any examples that you can give?
I think the ones, for instance, we did the one for Decatur. That superintendent is in his 3rd year there, and things are going very well as I've talked with the community as we're looking for the assistant superintendent. And I think the others, I was in Oak Park for 5 years, so HYA did the search when I went there. So I think that pretty much they have stayed.
So 5 to 7, generally speaking, is how long people stay, which is a good tenure. 5 to 10 would be better for some districts in terms of the degree of turnaround that they might need. We had one that we talk about in our brochure, who stayed in the Chicago suburbs for 26 years after placement. So that's unusual. The guy in Houston was unusual, and somewhere in the middle is typically 7 years, 5 to 7 years.
So in that context, did Houston come back to you to get another free search?
They did. They're getting a free search. Now, they are paying for expenses, but, yeah, Hank Jamitro, who's from suburban Chicago, originally was a superintendent here in Chicago area, and he's doing that search again. And I helped work with that search a little bit.
So, taking some questions from our absent member. In particular, with your firm, how do you handle candidates who are affiliated with, and I pronounce this broad, but I guess it's BROAD, Foundation?
It's Broad, yeah.
Broad, or
Broad.
who have attended Broad Academy.
Yeah, so we were criticized at one point for being too close to the Broad Academy. And what we've done in the past is, we and other search firms have gone and made presentations to them and shared with them, for aspiring superintendents, our experience in how to prepare for a superintendency. So we don't discourage people who attend the Broad Academy for applying for jobs that we're responsible for the search. But we don't get paid by the Broad Academy to give those presentations. I participated in presentations at NABC and the National Alliance of Black School Educators, and also ALICE, the Latino organization. And but I do it gratis, and so actually the company pays my expenses to go to ALICE. I went to San Antonio, Texas, and presented there to them and did some mock interviews. So it's not uncommon for search firms to help places like Superintendents Prepared at Harvard or Broad Academy or one of those.
Okay. And I think the other questions that Peggy had, you had already covered. Not this one. So, when you bring a candidate into the community, let's say we're down to the final three,
Yeah.
what would that day look like?
We would suggest that, since the board's got to make the final decision, that the board get to spend most of the time having give and take with the candidate and the candidate's spouse or significant other, if you want to do that part of the search. But it's happened in a couple of different ways. One is it could be strictly a meet and greet with a few remarks by the candidate and perhaps a couple of questions. It's probably important for as many of the board members to attend as possible, and therefore you probably want to declare it as a meeting if you're going to have a majority of the board there, majority of quorum of the board there. So that's how it could work. But we really think that it's important for the board to have one-on-one opportunities or two-on-one opportunities with the candidate at that stage, so that the board can scrutinize this person who's about to be with you for the next 5 to 7 years and do this important work. And so that's how we would approach it. That yes, it's fine to have that public exposure part. Is that your experience?
Yes,
Pam?
definitely, yes.
Okay. Okay.
On the experiences that you guys have had, the company has had. I'm going to make an assumption that you've worked with searches for nonprofit and non-public school districts as well as public school districts.
Yes, the firm has. I have
firm
not personally done that. I've only worked with public school districts, but the firm has done that.
Okay, and community consolidated school districts, unit school districts, so on and so
Yes.
forth like
Yes.
that. Okay. When it comes to your candidate pools, Do you have an idea about your percentage of female to male applicants, candidates?
Yeah, and it depends upon the job, but we, I'm thinking back of the slates that we presented, and then Connie, you talked about the ones that you've presented as well. Been really diverse in terms of ethnicity as well as male and female. The 14 searches that, the East Aurora search, definitely we had a diverse slate. Two Spanish-speaking candidates in the 6. One, two, it was 50% female. It was one African-American, two African-Americans, a male and a female. Just going through my head who was who. So we're good at seeking out a diverse candidate pool for the position. But a lot depends upon the position. A district with a diverse student population is going to be more attractive to a diverse candidate pool. Now, we don't have a pool in mind, I'll tell you that up front. We don't work like that. We don't have like a stable of people that we go to. We have to find out that profile that the board's looking for first and see what the board's looking for. How about your experience?
Yeah, and my experience has been similar. I think it just depends on the position, depends on the district, depends on who applies. Some people are looking for jobs in a particular area, Midwest versus, within a particular state, et cetera, a certain demographic as far as the district is concerned. So in some instances, there may be more male than female, but I usually find that there is diversity in the pools for all of the positions that people are applying for.
And once you do your thing, you would become the firm to do this, and you blast it out, however that magic ends up working for you. Area-wise, where do you think you ever get a real saturation of candidates? Is it somebody that lives within a 5-mile radius, 10-mile radius, 100-mile radius, or even 200 or more miles away? I mean, what does candidate pool, do you have an idea of really where the heaviest population of candidates come from? Somebody who's everybody that's just local, or is there like just further out type of range?
Yeah, what we present, typically when we bring the slate in, we'll show you the entire pool of applicants, where they're from, whether they're experienced superintendents or not, whether they're male or female, what race they are, and so on. We present that data to you so that you can get an idea. And it's not, I should turn this off now. It's not unusual for us, for a district like this, to get candidates from at least a dozen states, probably mostly in the Midwestern area, but occasionally from outside, because we find that there are people that maybe have lived in this area, moved away, but now want to come back. And so even though they're living in Cleveland or on the West Coast, this at one time was their home area, and they want to come back. So that's why it's hard to say that, no, they're only going to be within a 100-mile radius. That would be very unlikely in a district like this.
Okay.
Just so you know, I was in Lexington, Kentucky as superintendent before I went to Freeport, Illinois. And before I was in Lexington, Kentucky, I was in Davenport, Iowa. And before I was in Davenport, Iowa, I was in Scranton, Pennsylvania. 34 years as a superintendent, all told, for the 4 years.
And I was in Michigan for 13 years before I came to Illinois, and I've been here 16 years now. So
So
first-time candidates for a superintendent's job, how often does that happen with you? Somebody's coming up the ranks, maybe they were assistant superintendent, now they want to be a
Yeah.
superintendent
Yeah.
somewhere. Do you get a lot of those?
We-
Or are you more, or do you see more of somebody who's already been in a position and now they want to go
We'll-
up to different place?
We'll give you a concrete example, without telling you who was on the slate, because it was a confidential search. I'll tell you who was successful in getting the job, and we both know this individual. Jennifer Norell is the new superintendent in East Aurora. 15,000 students, mostly Latino student population. She had not been a superintendent before, but she had been an assistant superintendent in 2 school districts of substantial size and diversity. African-American woman. She went through a superintendent program that Connie was instrumental in helping her get ready for the superintendency. She was hired and competed with superintendents for this job. She was hired. She started working on July 1st. This past January, the board gave her a 3-year contract back in July. This past January, the board gave her a 5-year contract. She's doing that good a job. So, now that's one example, right?
That's a
There
good
are
one.
other examples, but again, coming back to your profile, do you want an experienced superintendent? Would you prefer an experienced superintendent? We'll ask you questions like that. We'll ask you, do you prefer somebody with a doctorate degree? Do you prefer somebody who has worked in a diverse school district? So we'll come back to your profile.
Exactly. Are you seeing candidates that want to move on every few years? You have repeat people that meet the qualifications for your searches that want to keep like climbing the ladder, getting to bigger districts, or is there an average of how many people just kind of want to wind down for that
maybe-
last thing before retirement?
Or maybe a way to look at it, is this a destination district or a stepping stone?
Yeah, obviously you don't want a stepping stone district, do you? And you want somebody that has a commitment to stay, and stay for that period that you were talking about. That because depending upon the identified work of the district, it can take 5 to 7 to 10 years for lasting change, for cultural change, for structural change in a school district. And it doesn't help the school district or the superintendent to stay 2 or 3 years and move on.
Have you had candidates that say, that initially tell you, hey, I really want to go with this district, I hope I make it through the process, but I'm kind of a package deal, I need to bring my people with me? Have you ever had a situation like that? If you have, how did you was it a good thing, bad thing? Did you have to defuse it, or?
I haven't. I've had situations where, subsequent to getting the job, there were some vacancies, and the superintendent knew of some qualified candidates that he or she had worked with, and talked to the board about bringing those people in. That's happened, but I have not experienced a package deal where somebody said, I don't know, are you interested in a package deal because you've got 3 vacancies, but that doesn't, yeah. Okay.
Necessarily. No.
And we want to customize it to what you're looking for and the process that you want to look for.
So I was looking for paper. Did you ask your question about what do you know about Urbana?
Well, they answered that.
Okay. I was looking for that piece of paper that I had to borrow. It was here, it's not here now. I think we're probably ready to hear what you have to say on your handwritten notes there,
Well,
or ask.
we're aware of the article that was in the newspaper about the Daily Herald and our firm. And you didn't ask us about that. I don't know if you're being polite about that, or you don't want us to, you want us to talk about that?
In the News Gazette, you mean?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So the Daily Herald about a year or so ago.
That's the Decatur paper, Daily Herald.
No, the Daily Herald is a
Oh,
newspaper
no,
in
oh, the
suburban
quotation from
Chicago.
up north. Yeah,
And
I'm
but the
with-
local newspaper here quoted some things
Yes.
from the Daily Herald.
Yes,
Yeah, about our firm. And without being defensive, they cited 3 searches, and you've seen how many searches we've done. And those are all explainable, and those all happened when I was working on the East Aurora search. And we had a public discussion about that with the school board and about those instances. And I can, without divulging some things that happened in a closed session that I didn't attend, because neither of us were involved in those 3 searches that were talked about in the article. I can say that there were a couple of things that were systemic weaknesses that have been since corrected. One had to do with a background check, and the other had to do with not fully disclosing that a person was signed a contract to work with HYA, but never really worked with HYA, but they didn't disclose that before they got hired for a superintendent's position. But suffice it to say that every time you do a search, you learn something new. And because every search is unique. And although we've got a standard process that we use, and we think that it's pretty well refined over 30 years, we're always learning new things about the sophistication of finding the best person to be a superintendent of schools. And what I can guarantee you is that we didn't work on those 3 searches that were criticized, but we are cautious, we're careful, we're thorough in what we do. And we will disclose to you everything that we know about a candidate before you even interview that person. Now, is there more to find out? Yes, there probably is. But as I said, we ask them, and you'd be amazed what people will tell you when you say to them, we want you to tell us anything that might show up anywhere, social media or anywhere, that might be embarrassing to you or the school district or the search firm. And people tell you about doing donuts in a schoolyard parking lot when they were 17 years old. And, so they talk to you about things like that. And then we impress upon them that you need to tell us this now, because if something comes out at a later point that embarrasses the board and you and us, you're going to have difficulty getting any kind of job in the future, because that's going to follow you. And so we have that good, frank discussion and do that counseling with people in our initial screening interviews. But I think the important thing is that to let you know, we hope that you have checked out our references, and we hope that you'll call the people in Decatur and the people in East Aurora among the other people that we listed in there, or go off our application and ask anybody that's worked with us or that knows us whether or not we're the kind of people that you want to help you with your search. And we also hope that you understand that we will work hard for you on your behalf, and we will work for you, and we don't work for the candidates. It's an important distinction. That's my handwritten notes.
okay. Any other questions that any board members have this evening? Preston would accuse me of dragging out the meeting if I go any longer. Just 1 second. I think they answered that question, Lori, through their portal. We're using text to get back and forth
That's
here
okay.
between our recording secretary. I have asked the other firms as exactly how they intend to keep in communication with the board
Yeah.
through the process.
And we, if again, it depends upon you, but we usually send out an email within a couple of days following the planning meeting. And then we send out an email update every 7 to 10 days. If we're not meeting with you, we'll send it by email to you, or if you want it some other way, we'll send it that way. The portal has documents on it. So, like I said, if we did a summary of the planning meeting, we'll send it to you by email. And if you want us to copy your superintendent and your board secretary, we'll also do that. Same with the board portal. We'll put all those documents on the board portal. You can all access that, and you can give access to your superintendent and to your board secretary as well. And so that's how we'll communicate with you. We also will do face-to-face, the planning meeting. When we come back and do the community engagement, we'll sit down with you and do a one-on-one, 1-hour interview with you. We'll come back and bring the results of that into the profile meeting. That'll be face-to-face. The two of us will come back to do that. We'll come back and do the workshop with you on interviewing and presenting the slate. We'll come back and be face-to-face with you at the end of the first round and second round of interviews.
I think the gist of the question is, do you prefer to have a single contact with the board?
Oh, okay.
I'm recalling now
Yeah,
what I was supposed to be asking.
Okay.
Not information that you necessarily want on the web, but information that we need to hear about
Yeah.
where you are in the process, or things that are not.
Yeah, what we send to the board
For the general public.
is confidential email. And what we put on the portal is accessible only to the board
Oh.
or to other people that have access to it. The portal is the board's portal. Nobody else sees that. We can see it, obviously. The board can see it. And if the board gives access to the superintendent and the board secretary, they can do that. So that's how we do that.
All right. Thank you.
Does that answer?
Yes, it does. Anything else from any board member? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Connie.
Thank you. Good to meet you. Yes.
Board members, please complete paperwork. And I think Lori, no, yes. Me? Lori will
Can I keep
compile
mine
it.
until Monday and turn them all in at once? If that's all right?
That's a good idea.
I want to be able to refer to it when I'm looking at the others.
And I won't be here Monday.
If you won't be here on Monday, turn it in tonight to Lori. If you're going to be here Monday, hang on to it. And then we'll turn them all in at once. With that, then, I believe that we are at the point of our formal open agenda to accept a motion of adjournment.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion's carried. I, however, do encourage everybody to fill out the paperwork before you leave.